Welcome to my channel people. The author link will be on the description, make sure to check it out. Izuku appeared in an empty room. He quickly scanned the room and saw the piece of Ida's armor with his seal on the bed. Of course, he looked around for my Horatian seal, Izuku said frustrated. He looked around and noticed that Ida's room wasn't exactly what he expected. Nothing was ordered in the normal fashion of his classmate. The bed wasn't made, and books and notebooks laying on the floor of the room along with empty bottles of orange juice. I should have pressed more about how he felt, Izuku muttered angrily at himself. Shaking his head, he dashed outside the room towards the streets, ignoring the pit in his stomach when he passed through a vacant agency. When he reached the streets, he quickly knew where he should go. The explosions and screams in the distance were obvious indicators. Izuku was worried that if the Namas creatures were as strong as the ones that attacked UA, they were in serious problems. Izuku quickly reached the place where the battle was, and he couldn't stop the scowl that appeared on his face, two Namas causing destruction and a small group of heroes barely keeping them at bay. At least those aren't as strong as the one on the campus. It would be a graveyard right now if they were. Izuku was brought out of his muttering by the cry of a heroine in a green and white jumpsuit was about to be crushed by a flying truck. He quickly threw a kunai beside her and in a flash, he moved her away from the danger. Are you okay? Izuku asked concerned. Why yes, what happened? Who are you? You're a kid, you shouldn't be here. The heroine sounded in panic. Don't worry, I have a permit. She raised an eyebrow and Izuku smiled at her. Have you seen my classmate Iida Tenya? I'm looking for him. She shook his head but another voice interjected. Iida Tenya. Izuku nodded to the hero who talked. Recognizing Manuel, Ida's hero in command who was trying to extinguish a fire. He ran off a few minutes before the attack started. Please, we'll take care of things here, just find him and bring him back. Izuku frowned but nodded. All right, I'll bring him back safe. I have a few words for him. Now please take care of my body for a while, he said to the heroine beside him, her eyes widening in confusion, but before that, shadow clone technique. The heroine and Manuel almost fainted when out of nowhere 10 green-haired kids exploded into existence. 5 of you help the heroes. The rest look for Tenya, now scatter. All of the clones nodded and went to their respective jobs. Izuku sat on the ground and closed his eyes. Manuel and the heroine were about to say something when roars on the battlefield made them look up from the sitting teen. In a matter of seconds, the tide of the battle turned around. The clones were pushing the creatures back with just melee attacks, letting the heroes take a much-needed breath. Manuel watched the battlefield with his jaw on the floor. Just who was this kid? He thought. After a couple of minutes, the original kid rose slowly. I found him, he said in a serious tone. One of the clones that were fighting leapt back and took the same sitting stance on the floor that the original had. I'm getting him back, Manuel. Please take care of this clone as much as you can. Before the hero could say anything, the kid already disappeared. Who was that kid, and weren't his eyes green? Earlier that day, inside a hidden bar in Camino, 3 men stared at each other intently. So you're the ones that attacked UA and now you want me to join your weird club? Stain smirked at Shigaraki. Yes. You have a lot of experience in the villain gig, senpai, Shigaraki smirked behind the hand on his face. I like to think myself more like a trash remover. Shigaraki's smile widened and nodded. Yes, you're removing the hero trash of the streets, I like that. Stain watched the childish glee on Shigaraki for a second. What are you looking for? What is what you want? Right now I just want to kill All Might. Stain's eyes narrowed. I want to destroy everything that I don't like. Shigaraki pulled a photo. Damn, kids with hacks are also on my priority list to destroy. Stain's smirk vanished completely. I guess I was stupid to even consider joining you. You're the kind of person that disgust me the most, Stain snarled. Huh. You want me to join your stupid childish delusion? What is just going around killing without a purpose, without an end? Stain grabbed the handle of his knives. Sensei, should I stop this? Kurogiri asked towards a PC. No, let this happen. This will help Tamura grow and mature, the voice on the PC answered. Shigaraki and Kurogiri stared at Stain, whose aura of hate started filling the atmosphere. I'm the one who calls the weak and the fake. Your lack of convictions makes you weak. Your childish behavior and meaningless goals make you a fake villain. Stain grinned maniacally and disappeared from their sight. Shigaraki couldn't register what happened until he heard a grunt of pain from Kurogiri. He quickly turned towards his ally only to see the mist villain with 3 knives buried on his side and both shoulders with Stain standing in front of him licking a knife. Kurogiri. Shigaraki dashed towards the hero killer, his hand aiming for his head. Suddenly a searing pain in his hand made him scream. His mind almost went black when he saw his hand dropping on the bar counter. Og. The world is already filled with fake heroes. It doesn't need villains without convictions too. Stain stood above Shigaraki. Die. He stabbed his knife directly into the head of the fallen villain. His eyes widened a little when Shigaraki stopped the knife, sacrificing his remaining hand. You crazy bastard. Conviction? I don't have anything like that. I just want to destroy this society that stands in the hands of that buffoon. The knife in his hand turned into dust. I'll destroy this rotten society from the ground. His hand snapped towards Stain, who stopped it midway, his skull turning into a blank face. Maybe I was too quick to judge you. It seems that even if our targets are opposites, our goal is the same, the destruction of this society we live in. Stain smirked and leapt back, putting away his knives. Return me to Hosu, tend those injuries, and prepare yourself more. Maybe you'll grow into someone worth killing. I don't have enough level to eliminate you at the moment, so you'll have to wait. Kurogiri, send him away. I don't need someone crazy like him as a team member, Shigaraki said through gritted teeth. He stood up and put pressure on his maimed limb. Kurogiri, who suddenly could move, didn't hesitate and opened a portal for Stain. Grow stronger, Shigaraki Tamura. Next time you and I will fight to the death. Meanwhile I still have things to do in Hosu. The manic smile on Stain before disappearing made Shigaraki take a step back. Kurogiri, take Tamura to Dr. Garaki. He needs his hand reattached, the voice on the computer said calmly. Sensei, how many namas do you have? Shigaraki's voice sounded colder than normal. 6. There aren't as strong as the ones you took to the UA, but they're ready. Give them to me. Kurogiri could feel the rage emanating from Shigaraki. Why? I hate the hero killer. I want to destroy him. You told me I could destroy anything I hated. The voice on the computer was silent for a moment. Okay, but you will only have 3. Give them their orders and go to Dr. Garaki to have your hand healed. Shigaraki nodded curtly. Moments later, Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and the Namas appeared on top of a building. Destroy everything, make the people forget the hero killer, Shigaraki said while gripping tightly his severed hand. Kill everyone in your path. The Namas leapt from the building towards the streets. A few seconds later, Shigaraki laughed maniacally when he heard the screams of terror below in the streets. Shigaraki, we must go to Dr. Garaki now. Nodding silently, both walked through a portal seconds later. Tenya knew that there would be terrible consequences for leaving Manuel's side, but after hearing that Native, the Fly, and Slugger were the next possible victims of Stain, when he saw the 3 patrolling together, along with another 2 heroes he didn't recognize a few blocks away from where he was, he knew he needed to tail them. If nothing happened, he could just tell Manuel that he didn't feel right and went to get some air. Leaving the hero that gave me my internship and thinking about lying. What is happening to me? Tenya stopped for a second and shook his head. I'm doing this for my brother. There is no consequence I'm not willing to pay for him. With that thought, he kept tailing the heroes who seemed really confident. I guess that when you're walking with a large group like that you would feel safe. A few minutes later an explosion made him and the heroes turn around. Someone is attacking where Manuel is. I need to get back. Before he could take a step, a strangled cry made him stop in his tracks. Returning his gaze towards the heroes, his blood ran cold at the sight. Slugger lay on the floor with a big knife in his chest. Tenya froze. He knew that the hero killer was ruthless, but seeing him kill a hero in a blink of an eye was something he didn't expect. He quickly understood the difference between a hero in training and a professional one when the 4 heroes that remained quickly snapped out of their stupor and started an attack on the hero killer, who used his sword to cut the arm of one of the heroes he didn't recognize. Tenya ran towards the fight after that, but he only stopped when he saw 2 reporters that were filming way too close to the fight. Get out of here is really dangerous. The reporters seemed startled and ready to say no, but Tenya didn't have time to repeat his orders. He needed to get to the fight. Tenya saw 2 heroes get defeated in what was practically a big swipe of Stain's sword. Only Native and the Fly remained. He saw an opportunity when the Fly spat black goo towards the hero killer. Recipro burst. His engines ignited and he reached Stain in a few leaps, aiming the most powerful kick he ever delivered towards Stain's head. The hero killer stopped it with his bare hand and threw Tenya against the building with enough force to shatter the wall. A kid in a suit, Stain said, "Run away from here, kid. This is no place for you." Stain then returned his gaze towards the heroes who were startled at Tenya's entrance. Stain used that moment to throw his knives toward the fly who fell to the floor bleeding profusely. Tenya watched intently at Stain. His outfit matched exactly as the reports said. Red scarf, blades all over his body. What didn't match the reports was his physical appearance. The reports didn't say anything about scales on his face or snake-like eyes. "You're Stain, the hero killer. I was looking for you." Stain turned his head back towards Tenya. "Your eyes, you came for revenge, right?" Stain aimed his sword towards Tenya. "Chose carefully your next words. You can turn into an objective with one mistake. So I'm not even an objective for you." Tenya started to get up from the debris, ignoring the calls from native to stay down or run away. "I'm the brother of the hero you cut his legs off. I came to stop you in his place. Remember my name, hero killer. I'm Ingenium." Tenya saw Stain's eyes narrow. "I see, you'll die tonight." Tenya tensed and prepared himself to attack when native jumped towards Stain with his spiritual bare paws attack ready. Stain jumped away from him and used a wall to jump back towards the pro-hero who received a visceral cut in his chest for his boldness. It seems that the fake wanted to redeem himself, buying you time, but it's too late for him. Tenya's engines exploded and he sent a powerful kick towards Stain who effortlessly avoided it. He jumped behind Tenya and slashed his back. He could feel the blood pouring from his back, but before could do anything Stain kicked his legs making him fall to the ground. Tenya wanted to scream, but the burning sensation on his back just let him growl at the hero killer. "If I didn't have the extra protection I requested from the support department after the sports festival, he would have probably severed my spine with that attack. You're weak. You and your brother are weak because you both are fakes." "Shut up, bastard," Tenya managed to growl. "My brother was an excellent hero and you destroyed his life. You had no right to do that. He was my hero, my inspiration. He gave me my dream to be a hero. If being a hero was your dream, why you didn't help any of the heroes here? I can sense the two of them are still alive. But instead of using your power to help the ones who needed it, you came straight to me to get revenge." Stain licked his sword and Tenya's body stopped responding. "You let your rage and emotions control your action, and that's far from what a hero should do. And you'll die for that." Stain took a step back and Tenya couldn't stop the tears of rage and frustration pouring from his eyes. "You're dead. Will let the real, a possible real hero take your place. Shut up. No matter what happens, you're just a criminal that likes to kill and end heroes' dreams. Goodbye, fake." Tenya closed his eyes hoping that his death would be painless, but the pain never came. Opening his eyes, he couldn't stop them from widening. In front of him was a very familiar kunai. "I recognized that kunai." The hero killer started when a powerful punch sent him flying away from Tenya, who couldn't look clearly at who it was but recognized those shoes everywhere. "Don't worry, Iida, I'm here." Finally, the Toad Sage and the Snake Sage crossed paths. Izuku looked around, seizing the situation. It was somber. 6 bodies lay around him, 5 pro-heroes, including the trio that he theorized could be the next victims in Iida. At least 4 of them needed to be in the hospital yesterday. At the same time, he felt a pit in his stomach, and an ominous feeling gripping his heart. "Iida, I'm sending you back to manuals. Get." Izuku used his kunai to stop the sword aimed at his neck. He sent a kick towards Stain, who retaliated with a powerful punch, sending them both apart. "Another child playing to be a hero." Stain hissed, but his eyes widened when he recognized Izuku. You're All Might's chosen one." Izuku raised an eyebrow. "A real hero." "I don't know anything about being the chosen one," Izuku said while denying in his head the possibility of Stain knowing about All Might's quirk. "But I'm going to ask you to leave these people alone, Stain. They haven't done anything to deserve dying here." Izuku was wary, the ominous feeling on his heart rose. "They're just a bunch of fakes. They are a disgrace to the sacred duty of a hero. They just do it for the money and the fame. They may have made some mistakes and some questionable decisions, but at the end of the day, they save people. That's the most important part of being a hero," Izuku said with fervor. Stain just shook his head. "You're young, even if you have the qualities of a real hero. You haven't seen how rotten the heroes are, how they left people die without trying because they don't have the right power, How they just don't act because their shift is over, how they turn their back to the people they swore to protect just because a situation it's too dangerous for them. My brother wasn't like that. Iida screamed from the floor. My brother never turned his back to the people, he always put the others before himself. He then talked to Izuku, Midoriya, don't let him taste your blood, that's how I became paralyzed. Izuku graded that information is crucial. Your brother was just another fame-driven fake, you don't think I haven't seen all his publicity stunts. He did it to keep giving jobs to his sidekicks. Stain sneered. Say whatever you need to sleep in peace, boy. To me, your brother was just another fake that needed to be purged. Stain suddenly tensed and smirked. You're crafty, I have to admit that, Stain said and turned around, sending a knife through the shadow clone that was about to teleport one of the fallen heroes away, making him explode. And smart too, trying to distract me while you save the fakes. But you more than anyone know, that as a sage is easier to detect chakra. Suddenly everything clicked to Izuku and he felt the pit in his turn into a black hole. You're a sage too, Izuku whispered. Now that his rescue attempt was frustrated and his mind was solely focused on Stain, he could feel it, the natural energy revolving around him. Now I have your undivided attention, huh? Stain said with a wicked smile. How? Izuku said, stunned. Let's just say, that in my darkest moments, when my determination started quivering, I happened to fell into the correct viper nest. Izuku's shocked state quickly turned into red-hot anger. You managed to master chakra in the sage mode. That requires a lot of determination and will. You can do so much good for the people. Instead, you're going around killing heroes. Ah, but my crusade is necessary for this world. I'll stain my hands with the blood of the fakes, just to make this society better. Now move away, hero. I'll finish my job. Stain drew another sword from his back. You know I won't do that, Izuku said through gritted teeth. Midoriya, leave. This is my fight, don't interfere. Iida growled. I'm not leaving you and the injured here, Iida. Izuku lowered his stance. That's the correct answer, hero. Let's test how strong is your will. Stain quickly lunged towards Izuku, who met him halfway. Their weapons clashed in the middle of the alley, creating a powerful blast that blew the paralyzed and injured away. Izuku sneered at the killer, who smiled wickedly. Both sages quickly started to trade blows, and the strength behind their hits quickly damaged the surrounding buildings. The swings from his swords could cut my head clean in a swipe. I need to take this fight to a wider area. Izuku threw a kunai towards Stain, who deflected it with his sword. Izuku appeared in the place of the kunai, catching Stain by surprise and kicking him outside of the alley. He quickly followed, leaving a shadow clone behind. I can't spare more chakra than that. Suddenly his instincts screamed at him. Izuku blocked most of the flurry of knives the killer sent in his direction, but a few managed to pass him, again catching his clone and making it disappear. A teleportation technique, I get it now. You're really amazing, but I just told you, hero, those are my praise, and I won't allow you to save them, Stain said, smirking. Izuku just growled and threw himself towards the killer. Wind style. Vacuum bullets. Izuku spat a barrage of air bullets at Stain, who in an amazing display of skill and speed cut his attacks. With apparent ease, Izuku narrowed his eyes. Wind style. Vacuum bomb. Stain blocked the technique with his swords that exploded into shards of metal, and Izuku capitalized that moment to get close to him. Stain threw a punch towards Izuku, who grabbed the attack and used his momentum to send him flying into the air. Izuku smirked. Gotcha. Using the seal on the hero killer's arm, Izuku teleported beside him and kicked him down, then teleported again, and before the villain crashed on the floor, Izuku made some seals. Lightning style. Elekiter. He used his electrified palm to hit the hero killer right into the solar plexus, blasting him away. Izuku teleported again to continue his attack, but was received by a kick to his legs that made him lose balance, and then another stronger kick on his stomach that sent him rolling on the floor. Izuku got up and saw the hero killer using a sword. Just how many swords he has. To cut the piece of flesh where his seal was, he just cut part of him like it's nothing. I told you before, hero, as a sage I can detect chakra better, even if it's just a small print on a seal. Izuku growled and lunged to attack again. Stain dodged and both started trading blows again. Izuku disengaged and pulled a scroll from his back pouch and said, Needle Rain. Throwing the scroll into the air while making a seal. Stain stopped for a moment, his eyes widening when he understood what Izuku just did. He took a powerful leap back that cracked the pavement and raised his swords to deflect the incoming projectiles. He raised his eyebrow when non-sharp sticks rained from the sky. When he caught the small traces of chakra, it was too late. He just managed to catch a whispered "Haration" beside his ear, before his body exploded in pain. Iida watched dumbfounded at the scene happening in front of him. He knew, deep inside him, that his friend was stronger than everyone in his class. He won the sports festival, and even if he wouldn't admit it ever, Iida knew he won it with ease. From his fighting skills, his amazing capability as a strategist, to his immense and crazy number of techniques, Iida understood that his friend was a level above him and his classmates. But watching him pummeling the hero killer like he was doing it was something mind-blowing. The hero killer looked like a ragdoll being thrown around by punches and kicks that Iida was sure were strong enough to break bones. After a minute of pummeling his opponent, Izuku kicked the hero killer into the air and appeared above him. Wind style. Great breakthrough. The powerful wind attack made the hero killer crash wildly to the floor. When the wind stopped, Izuku was heavily breathing. Lava style. Ash stone ceiling technique. He covered most of the hero killer's body and walked towards Iida, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Iida, I'll teleport the worst injured first. Izuku felt his body go numb and fell to the ground. What happened? You are really ruthless for someone that wants to be a hero, you know. Izuku felt his blood go cold when he heard the raspy and pained voice of the hero killer. If you used that against anyone else, you would have probably killed them, or not. After all, you probably went with everything you got against me because I'm also sage. Izuku tried to move his body to no avail. He then heard his sealing technique crumble. How are you conscious? Izuku asked Stain, but looking at Iida with an alarmed expression. Ah, you almost got me with that last attack. If you attacked me with anything else, I would unconscious. The fallen teens heard the cracks of Stain's body while he stretched. But the wind is my elemental affinity, and I may have not learned a lot of techniques because I focused on my physical skills, but I learned how to counter wind with wind. Iida suddenly looked a little green. What is he doing? Izuku asked Iida after seeing his face. He's eating a snake, the blue-haired boy whispered. What do you mean he is? Izuku felt a spike in the hero killer energy. He has natural energy stored in snakes. Ah, that's much better. You're really something else, hero. I ran out of natural energy after all that healing. Izuku tried to force himself to move again after hearing the hero killer voice again, full of energy. You definitely are going to grow into a fine and true hero. And in the future, when I'm finally done, I will be glad to be killed by you. But for now, I have a job to finish. Stain started walking towards them. Get away, Stain! Izuku screamed. He noticed that he was regaining the feeling on his toes. A few more seconds. Izuku quickly called for the shadow clone he had on standby in the city. The clone appeared in front of Stain, startling him for a few moments, before chuckling. I don't know since when you had that clone hiding, but giving the fake a few more seconds of life won't change anything. Stain raised his sword and leapt towards the clone that blocked and parried a few attacks but was finally kicked away and disappeared. Stain shook his head and walked towards Iida, passing beside a desperate Izuku. Iida saw the hero killer raise his sword and closed his eyes, not managing to stop the tears falling through his cheeks. I'm sorry, brother. I told you, hero, that it wouldn't change anything. Goodbye, fake. Stain pushed down his sword toward the fallen hero student. A hand covered in lightning stopped his blade. His eyes widened when he saw Izuku crouched beside him, with all his body covered in lightning, shining like a bonfire in a cave. Believe me, it changed everything. Lightning style. Chakra mode. Before Stain could snap out of his shocked state, Izuku punched him with all his might, sending him through a few buildings. That won't stop him for long. Izuku jumped towards the injured heroes and prayed that they were still holding in to live. He teleported them away towards the seal he left on the floor where his clone was gathering chakra. Hopefully the heroes that were guarding my clone are still there. After sending them away, he appeared in front of Iida. Now is your turn. Iida's protest stopped in his throat when he saw the scared and urgent look on Izuku's face, who turned around and used his body to block the knives the hero killer threw at them, the armor of the chakra mode deflecting every knife. Must be type O. Also the natural energy probably decreased the time of my quirk. They heard Stain whisper, apparently at himself, anger latching into every word. I told you, Stain hissed. They could hear the cold fury leaking in his voice, to not touch my prey. Before Izuku could think about teleporting Iida away, he was on defense, using his kunai to stop all the attacks he could. What is going on? He is way faster than before, I need space. Izuku ducked under a high swing of Stain's sword, fire style, great fireball. Izuku knew that Stain couldn't dodge the attack from that distance but was surprised when the fireball split in two. No sword can do that. Izuku quickly leapt back and saw the sword of Stain covered in wind chakra, that could probably go through my lightning armor. Stain leapt at him again and Izuku started making space using his Horatian seals, but every time he appeared, Stain only took a couple seconds to catch him. He could barely avoid his sword thanks to the enhanced reflexes and speed of his chakra mode combined with his sage state. Izuku was scared. Stain apparently wasn't holding anything back anymore. Earlier they were trading blows as equals until Izuku managed to catch him by surprise with that barrage of attacks. Now it was a completely different fight. Stain was faster and wilder. If Izuku avoided or deflected one of Stain's attacks, the Snake Sage retaliated with a knee or elbow to the body, which Izuku knew were strong enough to break something. If I weren't using chakra mode, he couldn't finish the thought. And suddenly it happened. Stain finally managed to cut Izuku. A deep gash on his leg made Izuku cry in pain. Thinking quickly, Izuku summoned two clones to get some time before Stain manages to paralyze him. But Stain didn't lick his blood. Izuku jumped back, avoiding a powerful swipe that went through the floor like butter. Both clones leapt to attack, giving Izuku a second to breathe. I'm not used to combining these techniques. Chakra mode burns my natural energy quickly. I need to stop him now. Izuku saw his clones get turned into pincushions, and prepared himself to attack. Storm style. Laser circus. Hundreds of beams of energy sailed towards the hero killer, who even with all his speed couldn't avoid them completely. Izuku could see the burns and wounds appearing in the Snake Sage where his attacks landed, but the man didn't seem to notice them and kept running towards Izuku at incredible speed. Izuku cut his attack and threw a volley of shurikens at Stain, who again just took them directly. The villain got several shurikens buried deep into his body. Izuku's eyes widened and teleported away, only for his senses to scream at him to move. He quickly ducked and teleported again. He's getting faster. If Stain took a couple of seconds to catch him before, now it was practically instantly. Izuku narrowed his eyes and teleported again, then used all his speed to deflect Stain's sword. That cost him a deep wound on his hand. Stain reared his arm to attack again when the explosive tag Izuku put on his sword activated, blowing them both away. Izuku took advantage of the explosion and after quickly recovering his balance he jumped high. He saw when Stain leapt from the dust cloud. Izuku grimaced when he saw that the right side of his face and his arm burned. He grabbed Izuku's ankle and with all his might threw him towards the floor. The pavement exploded when Izuku crashed. The air on Izuku's lungs disappeared when he hit the floor, but Stain didn't let him catch a breath. Izuku rolled to his right, he avoiding being impaled by the wind sword of the hero killer. Then he received a powerful kick that sent him through a wall. Before Izuku could regain his bearings, searing pain on his shoulder made his mind go blank. I finally caught you, hero. Stain hissed and quickly pressed two fingers hard on Izuku's shoulder wound. Izuku screamed in pain and teleported outside. Before he could think about doing something, his body was paralyzed again. Damn. I couldn't summon clones. He could feel Stain's quirk running out quickly thanks to the natural energy and the increased metabolism of the chakra mode. Yes, I just need a couple of AK. Izuku's planning was interrupted by a broken sword buried deep on his right side. Izuku wanted to vomit from the pain. He slowly opened his eyes just to see the horrible face of the hero killer right in front of his. I have to admit, hero, I was planning to kill you for what you did to my praise, but that last blast managed to snap me out of my rage, and even if you got in the middle of my crusade, you're still a true hero. Your actions today just confirmed it. You just needs to grow. Stain smirked wickedly. It seems that I'll just have to resign myself to kill just the younger fake. Izuku saw his snake-like eyes glow in anticipation and whispered something that Stain didn't manage to catch. What did you say, hero? I said that my hero name is Hokage. Rasengan. Izuku grabbed Stain with his left, stopping him from escaping his attack. Both sages screamed in pain. Stain was twisting the blade in Izuku's side and Izuku was pushing his Rasengan with all his strength into the killer. Finally, Stain was sent flying away, crashing hard into the pavement meters away from Izuku. Izuku spat a lot of blood, but he knew it wasn't time to faint. Turning quickly in the direction of the hero killer, he prayed to be over. And Stain wasn't moving and Izuku saw that his face lost the sage mode characteristics. It is over. Izuku's internal questioning was interrupted when a crying Iida crouched beside him. Izuku, look at you, I'm so sorry, Iida cried, and even in the situation they were in, Izuku felt happy that his friend was using his given name. If it wasn't for my stupid revenge, you wouldn't be in this state. Please forgive me, Izuku sighed and turned off his chakra mode, then took the blade on his side and started to pull it out. Wait, don't do it, you'll bleed out. Don't worry Iida, I still have enough natural energy to close the wound enough to get to a doctor, but we'll need to walk. I don't have enough chakra to teleport the three of us, Izuku said without turning to look at his friend. He then pulled the sword out and bit a yell of pain. He focused the rest of his natural chakra towards the deep wound. That would hold enough. Izuku then turned to Iida. You're really stupid, you do know that right? Iida flinched. I'm sorry, I was just so angry. I knew that I needed to stay with Manuel, but Iida couldn't continue and started crying again. We'll talk about that later. I'm just happy that I got here in time. Izuku smiled at him and started to get up. Iida quickly helped him. Let's find something to tie up Stain, and Izuku's eyes widened and his face was suddenly covered in blood. He didn't notice that, after all, his eyes were firmly focused on the knife buried deep into Iida's chest. Iida! Izuku screamed and hugged his friend. No, please no. Iida, please no. Izuku turned to look at the hero killed who was still on the floor but had his arms stretched and a sadistic smile on his face. Izuku didn't know what to do, where he could teleport his friend to get help. Suddenly a foreign voice called for him. Go to recovery girl. Izuku's head snapped towards the voice of a cameraman who was trembling in fear and was hiding behind one of the fallen walls of the buildings. He was the one who called for him. I just got a message from your principal and he said that recovery girl was waiting for you. Izuku had a lot of questions, but even in his panicked state he couldn't help but feel relief knowing that his sensei somehow was watching over him. Izuku nodded and focused. He quickly extended his senses looking for his seal on recovery girl's office, and his heart dropped when he noticed that he didn't have enough chakra to teleport both of them that far. You're going to be fine Iida, you hear me? I'll catch you as soon as I can. Iida's eyes widened. You have to come with me. Izuku started crying when Iida coughed blood. I don't have enough energy to teleport both of us that far. I promise that I'll see you there as soon as I can. Iida was about to cough another protest, but Izuku teleported him away. The young sage could barely keep himself standing and conscious. His chakra was almost at zero. He heard rustling from Stain's position and knew that the hero killer was getting up. You should leave, kid. You saved everyone already. Please just leave. Izuku turned towards the cameraman again and smiled at him. Don't worry, I got this. Hokage. Izuku wanted to vomit when he heard the adoration on Stain's voice saying his name. I have to admit that, when I woke up today, I didn't imagine that it will go down like this, but I'm pleasantly surprised that the future would be in hands of someone like you. Stain finally stood up. Izuku saw how hurt was the hero killer. The damage on his right side was something that would most definitely kill anyone else. He couldn't help but be amazed at the willpower he had. It's over, Stain. We both are barely standing and I'm pretty sure that other heroes are coming this way, coming to arrest you. Stain started chuckling. Oh Hokage, you don't seem to understand. I'm not scared to be imprisoned. What do you think will happen to me? They'll send me into the deeper chamber of Tartarus, put a quirk suppressant handcuffs on me, and let me down there to meditate about my wrongdoings. Izuku didn't understand what Stain was trying to say. I mean, imagine how much natural energy I could gather down there. Izuku's heart dropped to the floor when Stain's words finally made sense. It was the constant fear in Aizawa's sensei heart when he discovered the source of Izuku's power. You know, I can't be imprisoned. After all, our powers are above what this world understands and can stop. Stain lifted his broken sword and completed a full blade made of wind. What are you going to do now, Hokage? If you leave now, I'll leave as well, but my crusade won't stop for long. If you beat me and get me imprisoned, I'll come back, I can promise you that. If you don't end the fight now, how many fakes will fall to my sword before you or all might get another shot like this? Izuku grimaced, seeing at how crazy and deranged Stain was behaving. But even seeing his crazy state, Izuku was terrified, because everything he said was true. He knew that Stain's sage powers made him impossible to keep imprisoned by conventional means, and even if he gets Fukusa-sensei to help him with a solution, it would require time that Stain will use to gather natural energy, heal himself and escape. Izuku's mind was working at 1,000 thoughts per second, and finally, he made his mind. I have to end this here. Izuku's voice sounded sad and resigned. He started gathering what little chakra he had left on his right hand. Rasengan. Stain's wicked smile grew impossibly long. Yes. That's the correct answer, Hokage, Stain said and ran towards Izuku, who did the same with a yell. The cameraman had felt a lot of things in the course of the battle. Fear was the most prominent one after seeing the hero killer dispatch pro-heroes like Bugs, at the incredible skill the young hero had, after reducing and almost beating the hero killer, and sadness for the other hero student who was gravely injured. Right now all he felt was dismay. Looking at the young hero, Hokage, he reminded himself, threw himself to land one last attack on Stain. Even if some part of his mind told him to turn away and run, he couldn't keep his eyes away from the battle. When they were close to each other, the cameraman saw it in slow motion. Hokage threw his body to the side to avoid the swing of Stain's sword and threw the energy sphere he had in his right hand toward the villain. Stain's attack missed and cut almost completely the building beside them, but Hokage's landed on his right side again. The shockwave sent the cameraman tumbling backward. He groaned in pain, but he quickly shook his head and took the camera from the floor, aiming it towards the battle scene. The world can't miss this. He first focused the camera on the hero killer, who was again unmoving. After a few seconds of looking at the unmoving villain, he started looking for Hokage. When he finally found him, he almost dropped the camera. There was the young hero who had enough skills and strength to fight an S-ranked villain, standing tall but clearly unconscious, with his right hand gripping tightly the bloody stump where half of his left arm should be. At the distance he could hear the yells of the approaching heroes. In the grand scheme of things, the heroes were just a minute late. Izuku wanted to stay sleeping, but that annoying beeping sound was getting on his nerves. He tried opening his eyes, but his body refused to obey. Okay, don't freak out. You're experiencing sleeping paralysis. What does the post on that blog said? Try moving your toes first. He then tried to move his toes and he jolted at the sudden spike of pain. Alright, maybe I'm not in a sleeping paralysis. Using all his strength, Izuku managed to open his eyes slowly toward a blinding white light. After his eyes got accustomed to it, he was received by a white ceiling and bright lights. He turned towards his right slowly and watched the medical equipment that was making the noise with narrowed eyes. Ah, hospital beeping machine, I hate you. His train of thought was cut when everything that happened crashed into him like a sledgehammer. Izuku quickly jumped off the bed and fell to the floor, his body failing him. He tried to get up quickly only to fall on his left side. Wah! The sharp pain that exploded on his left arm made him cry in agony. He heard steps running in his direction. Wah, Hokage sir, what happened? A nurse screeched, and then she reached towards a button beside Izuku's bed. You shouldn't be moving right now, sir. Your injuries are still healing. Izuku had two questions in his head. Did she just call me sir? And, what injuries? He knew that he should be focusing on the latter, but after a few moments she felt the nurses lifting him toward the bed. Hokage sir, please don't move, let me check your bandages please. Izuku saw her hands move towards his left arm and he froze. He started trembling at the sight of his arm, or where it should have been, the bloody bandage wrapped just below his elbow. The next minutes passed quickly with Izuku in a state of shock. He could hear people around him, but his ears felt as if were stuffed with cotton. I lost an arm. Well, half of my left arm. Or more like a third of my arm. Can I keep going like this? Of course, I can. But making seals is practically impossible now. No. I can do a few seals with one hand, but the more complex techniques are now just impossible. What would I do? How would I? Izuku's mind was spiraling into despair when he felt a pair of hands shaking him softly by his shoulders and another smaller set of arms wrapping around his waist. Izuku baby, please breath, Inko said softly with tears threatening to slip from her eyes. Izuku's sight focused on his mom, and then he looked down at Eri, who was hugging his waist tightly. Even in the state he was in, Izuku couldn't stop the soft smile that appeared on his face from watching the small girl. Hey mom, he said softly, and the dam broke. Izuku prepared himself to receive Midoriya Inko's special hug but was surprised by the soft and tender touch of his mother. Izuku let himself get hugged and used his right arm to pat Eri's head. Thank God you're awake. Izuku nodded into her embrace holding his tears. I know is a dumb question but how do you feel? Like if a dived straight into a wood shredder and then a bus ran over what came off the machine. Inko couldn't help but snort a little. My body hurts mom, but I'll get better in no time. Then he looked at his left arm. Mostly, Izuku saw that his mom wanted to say some serious words to him and decided to change the subject quickly. You haven't said anything, Eri. What are you thinking? The small girl looked up with teary eyes. I thought I wouldn't see you again. Izuku's heart broke when he heard her wobbly voice. Ah, so you thought that you could escape from my hugs. Izuku then hugged Eri. His right arm wrapping around the small child easily. He saw Eri stare at his left arm with sadness in her eyes. Don't worry Eri, I got you covered. Two Izukus appeared in front of them and threw themselves at Eri who smiled softly at being hugged by so many of her hero. Izuku's eyes focused on his left arm again and sighed sadly. He then made his clones disappear and hugged the small girl tightly. They couldn't reattach your arm. Inko's voice was barely a whisper. When that man cut it, your arm, it landed close to a building that collapsed. Izuku nodded, his eyes widened in fear and alarm. Stain. Izuku's blood turned into ice when his mother just shook her head. He felt a grip in his heart but kept asking, what about the heroes and Tenya? The Fly is in ICU, his future is uncertain, the other heroes are still in a delicate state but the doctors managed to stabilize them, Inko said. Do you know anything about Tenya? Izuku pressured his mom who shook her head. Ua has only made a statement saying that he's recovering. Izuku smiled and nodded. I managed to save them. I'm glad. Izuku's eyes watered. I guess this is it. My last act as a hero. Izuku said softly, using all the strength he had in him to not cry over Eri's head. Oh, why would you think that, young Midoriya? Izuku's head snapped up when he heard All Might's voice. Everything it's fine now, why? Because I'm here. And I'm also here. Nezu was perched on All Might's shoulder. They've been here since yesterday. You didn't tell me that you knew All Might. Inko whispered the last part. Izuku chuckled a little and just shrugged, his eyes widened suddenly. Yesterday. How much I was asleep. Just a couple of days, don't worry about it. You seriously can't stop getting in trouble, young man, Nezu said chuckling, and Izuku smiled softly at his senseis. I've been told that meddling where you don't have to is the essence of a hero, Izuku said smiling. You're very wise, young Midoriya, All Might said nodding. Sensei, how is Iida? Izuku asked. Nezu sighed and scratched his head a little. Iida's health is stable and recovering. The knife thankfully didn't pierce his heart, but his involvement in the fight made his situation at the school complicated. We're working on that, Izuku nodded, with mixed feelings, happy for Iida getting better but worried about his future as hero student. He took a deep breath and decided to ask the big question. So, what are my charges? The mood in the room got somber. We've managed to keep most of the heat off you, Izuku, Nezu said. After all, you managed to not only save 5 pro heroes and 1 hero student, but you also defeated an S-tier villain. Izuku was about to say something but stopped when he felt Eri move a little on his waist. He turned to his mom and signaled her to take Eri. Inko nodded. Eri, can you and mom bring me something to drink for one of the machines outside please, I'm really thirsty. Can you be my hero, Eri? Eri nodded quickly and took Inko's hand, practically dragging her out. Izuku needs something to drink. Let's go. Izuku smiled softly at the scene for a moment, and then his body slumped down. I didn't defeat an S-tier villain. I killed Stain, Izuku whispered. I'm supposed to be a hero. My job is to protect lives. Izuku put his head on his right hand, the tears finally rolling down his cheeks. You're not wrong, young Midoriya. We are protectors, but sometimes the only way that we heroes have to protect life is by taking the life of the one that is threatening them. Izuku looked at All Might with a pained expression. I'm not saying that you should feel proud of it. It's the last resource we have after all. But don't think for a moment that we would think less of you for making that choice. I have taken that option a couple of times in the past, when the villain was such a threat to the people that they left me no other option. The one that made the hole in my left side was one of them. Izuku nodded slowly, still crying. Izuku, Stain was using chakra, right? Izuku turned to Nezu. he was also using a variant of your sage mode if I'm not mistaken. Yes, yes, he was a sage too. Izuku's right hand turned into a fist. He managed to master a power that requires so much will, self-control, and training. And he decided to use it to kill people. Yeah, to be honest, I'm glad that he is gone. Izuku turned to Nezu with widened eyes, then turned to All Might who shrugged. I know it sounds awful, but we saw what he was capable of, and what he said about we not having means to keep him incarcerated was true. Our quirk suppressant cells meant nothing to a chakra user. That doesn't make what I did right. Izuku narrowed his eyes for a second. Wait, what he said. But how did you know? Izuku's eyes widened. The reporter, he whispered. Indeed. Nezu sighed exhausted. Most of your battle was broadcasted live, making it impossible to keep your involvement in secret. The good news is that the public is mostly on your side. The bad news is that the HPSC is going to need your declaration. Is that too bad? Normally I would say that he is exaggerating, but you being given your hero permit by him and myself put you in a complicated spot. All Might said, Nezu doesn't have the best relationship with the commission and they don't like me a lot because I don't let them rule my actions. So the commission will surely revoke my hero permit, Izuku said sadly. I don't think they would. The public will eat them alive, Nezu said smirking. They'll probably try to intimidate you or convince you to transfer to their hero programs. I know you're smart enough to avoid both scenarios. Izuku smiled at the trust Nezu had in him. They still can put a lot of obstacles for me getting my full hero license. Izuku sighed but All Might smiled. That's why I'm here. Izuku raised an eyebrow. In case they try anything I'll just need to tell the world that I'm one of the 2 heroes sponsoring you. Izuku's eyes widened. The public will surely blow a fuse if they know about the commission putting obstacles in the young hero sponsored by the number 1 hero. All Might, you can't do that. Izuku blurted. You've never sponsored anyone. After the fiasco with Stain, people will start doubting you. That if we don't mention the few of your haters that will have a field day with this situation. All Might again just laughed. My boy, I don't care about that. When Nezu told me about the idea to give you your hero permit, he explained to me what could happen. I gladly accepted every possible scenario. The only thing that worries me is the target I could put in your back. All Might sighed. To be honest with you, neither Nezu nor myself considered that we'll need to say something to the public about us sponsoring you, at least not so soon, he chuckled. I'm sorry, but don't worry about me being a target. After all, this may be my last act as a hero, Izuku said sadly. Alright, you said that earlier, why would you think that, my boy? I lost an arm, All Might, Izuku said whispering. Don't worry about that, Izuku. As we're talking right now, the support department is working on a high-tech prosthetic for you. Nezu chirped. Izuku smiled but shook his head. It'll be of incredible help, but most of my techniques require hand seals. Even with a prosthetic it won't have chakra conduits, which means that I wouldn't be able to use them. Izuku's head dropped to his hand again. My boy, All Might sat beside him. Believe me when I say that I can understand the feeling of losing a part of you. All Might touched his left side, and Izuku frowned. He got his stomach and lung ripped out and kept moving forward, and I'm here feeling bad for losing half of my arm. But I see a lot of myself in you, young Midoriya. I see the drive and frankly my stubbornness. Is normal to feel like you can't keep going after what went through, and believe me, no one will fault you if you decided that you don't want to continue, but answer me honestly, will you be able to stay seated while people need your help? Izuku was quiet for a few moments. No, I wouldn't be able to. Izuku meant that even if he didn't sound sure. Izuku, we know that you'll be able to succeed. This is a rough patch and you're entitled to feel awful, but Yagi and I know that you're going to get back from this situation stronger. Nezu smiled softly. I will try. Nezu and All Might looked at each other and decided that it was too early for Izuku to accept and move past his new situation. Suddenly Nezu's phone dinged and his eyes narrowed. The HPSC commissioner is here. I'll send a message to Mrs. Midoriya to wait for a little before coming back. This is going to be quick. Nezu's voice sounded cold. Worry not, young Midoriya. We're on your corner, and you don't have to answer anything you feel uncomfortable with. Izuku nodded at All Might and took a deep breath. A few moments later the door was opened by a man in a suit, who quickly looked at Izuku and then turned to Nezu who was beside him. Good morning, my name is Shimoda Arata. I'm from the Hero Commission and I'm here to take the statement of Midoriya Izuku about Stain's case. Could you please leave the room? Izuku could hear the authority in the voice of the man. I don't think that's possible, Nezu said. The ice in his voice made Izuku's hair on the back of his neck raise. I'm Principal Nezu, one of the people that authorized Midoriya's hero permit, so I'm allowed here. The commissioner narrowed his eyes. Of course the other hero is also here. Nezu smirked and looked towards All Might, who was on the corner of the room with his arms crossed watching silently. Commissioner Shimoda's eyes widened, not believing how he could have missed the massive figure of the number one hero. I see. I'm glad that you both are here. The authority in his voice was crumbling at the sight of the symbol of peace. This is just a routine process, you shouldn't have bothered being here. Is not a bother to come and see the young man I'm sponsoring, right? All Might asked, and the commissioner quickly shook his head. No, of course. He cleared his throat and turned towards Izuku. The commission just has a few questions for you, young man. Izuku nodded. First, can you tell me please, why were you in Hosu? Izuku took another deep breath. Straight to business, I see. I was watching the TV, then the program cut to the news that talked about the situation in Hosu. Then the image changed again, apparently to a reporter tailing Stain, but all that the camera showed was a severed arm. Izuku sighed. One of my best friends was there. I got worried, and since I have a hero permit I decided to go and help as much as I could. So I teleported there. The commissioner nodded and looked through the notebook he had on his hand. It says here that you use a seal to use that ability of you. Izuku again nodded. Why did you have a seal on Hosu? Oh, I have seals on my friends, with their permission of course. We use them to practice in class and in case of emergency. Izuku scratched the back of his head. I see, and this was really an emergency. Now that we're talking about that, can you explain to me how your teleportation technique actually works? Before Izuku could answer, Nezu interfered. I don't think that's relevant, don't you? Think that, All Might? I think you're right. How young Midoriya uses his techniques is irrelevant. We should be simply glad that he has the technique. After all, that's the reason he saved all those heroes, don't you think? The commissioner heard what All Might was implying and nodded slowly. They're right. Sorry, I was just really intrigued. Now we have seen what you can do from the sports festival. You can teleport, and it's safe to assume that you can teleport other people. Izuku nodded. Then why did you decide to engage when you could teleport them away? Stain was fast. Shimoda raised an eyebrow. I need time to teleport people. The more people or a longer distance meant more time. Stain's speed was something honestly terrifying. He could match my close-range teleportation with just speed. I just didn't have enough time to do that. I see, Shimoda said while writing in his notebook. Last question, why did you decide to kill Stain? The room suddenly felt cold. How dare you? All Might hissed. You more than anyone knows why he had to do that. He doesn't just decide to do it. Izuku felt the room vibrate even if All Might wasn't shouting. We have an idea, but we need to hear his reasoning. After all, took the life of a criminal. Even if he was an S-tier villain. All Might took a step towards the man, but Izuku raised his right hand, stopping him. They looked at each other for a while and finally, All Might sighed. Izuku turned toward the commissioner. Did you see the fight on the TV? Shimoda nodded. Did you hear what he said? Part of the audio was lost due to the damage to the camera, but we got your last conversation. Conversation? Izuku huffed. Well, if you heard the conversation, he said the reason why I decided to put an end to it. I could have left him to leave, yes, and he will let me go in return. But he wouldn't stay down for long. How many heroes would fall before we could have another chance to end it? I hate, with all my being, that I had to kill him. You have no idea how much I hate myself for that. That I wasn't strong enough to apprehend him. That I couldn't put him in the deepest dungeon of Tartarus. Izuku's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to do it, but I knew that if I let him go, I would be at least partially responsible for all the lives he would have taken. Again, the commissioner just wrote in the notebook. How are you so sure he wouldn't stay down for long? Nezu, who had been silent, hissed. You're not a field agent, right? Shimoda raised an eyebrow and shook his head. Yeah, I can see that. If you were one, you should know that a villain with the conviction, will, and strength he had wouldn't let his injuries stop him for long. Midoriya answered all your questions. I think that would be all. Shimoda looked at Nezu and then turned to All Might, who was just looking at him with a raised eyebrow. He coughed into his hand and stood up. I have everything that I need for the moment then. Thank you for your cooperation. He took some papers from his notebook. Before I leave, let me gift you these pamphlets. Izuku took the papers confused. Feel free to call us if you decide that your current hero training is lacking. Shimoda looked at Nezu from the corner of his eye. And please forgive me for the questioning, but this is the procedure. Then Shimoda bowed lightly. Thank you for taking care of the villain. The pay for your success will be sent to your account shortly. Shimoda didn't even acknowledge Nezu or All Might and left the room. Did he say pay? Izuku asked baffled, and All Might laughed loudly at his expression. My boy, of course, you'll get paid. It wasn't a small feat what you did. Izuku nodded slowly. On the bright side, they don't look too inclined to try and put a dent in your career. You would have paid for your encounter with Overhaul too, but you didn't have your permit at the moment, so you'll have to make do with Stain's reward. Nezu said, smirking. Izuku shook his head in disbelief. Now sorry for my curiosity, but what are those papers? Izuku read the pamphlets and sighed, handing them to Nezu. Ah, those snakes don't lose any opportunity to try and snatch young heroes. Nezu growled at the specialized hero training by the HPSC pamphlets, but returned the papers to Izuku, who just put them on the side table. Now young man, you must rest, you need to recover. Thank you. Izuku smiled softly at his senseis. Now I know you won't like it, but it'll be necessary for you to talk to make a statement for the media along with Yagi and me. Izuku's eyes widened. The people know about you. Being the winner of the sports festival put a spotlight on you, and when the fight with Stain was aired, people knew who was the young hero fighting him. People know it was you. Your name is all on the media. Nope, All Might, please hit me in the head. He turned towards the number one hero. Don't miss the spot right between the eye and the ear. You're exaggerating, young Midoriya, All Might said while ruffling his hair. Don't worry, it can be made in those new internet social thingies. Most of the questions will be for us as your sponsors, but you need to answer at least a couple of questions. Izuku chalked with his spit. Internet social thingies. For the first time since he woke up, he laughed freely. Nezu chuckled while All Might face turned scarlet. He laughed hard for a while and then sighed happily. You'll be there with me, right? Of course, was the answer of both his teachers. He couldn't help but feel relieved. We must leave now, Izuku. Take a rest. We'll be waiting for you in Ua. Nezu smiled and patted Izuku's leg. We must go, Yagi. We need to prepare the internet social thingy. It was a great idea. All Might sighed loudly and lifted the small principal towards his shoulder before his teachers left the room. Izuku asked again. So you're still going to say that you gave me my hero permit? Izuku whispered. My boy is the symbol of peace. I'm proud of a few of my accomplishments. Giving you a hand on becoming the best hero you can be is ranked pretty high on that list. I'm on the same boat. Giving you your permit was one of the best decisions I've made, Nezu said, smiling. Izuku felt the pride his mentor and his idol felt for him and couldn't help but feel guilty about still having doubts. Also, I would like for you to meet the next holder soon. Izuku's eyes widened. Tagata Mirio decided to take the mantle. I'm really happy that you found your successor, All Might. Izuku said with sincerity. Oh man, I can't wait to meet him. Yeah, he took his time to accept, but I know he'll be an amazing successor. All Might smiled softly at Izuku. And I have to admit that signing your hero permit is my own way to make you my successor too. You may not have my quirk, but I also choose you. Izuku's chest almost exploded with pride after that. His senseis left the room and Inko and Eri entered immediately. He spent a good chunk of the day talking with his mom and Eri, when he noticed something. Wait, where is Gamabu? Izuku finally noticed the missing small frog. Actually, I don't know. When we got here, she just jumped away from Eri, made some signs, and left quickly. Izuku raised an eyebrow. That's definitely suspicious. Hopefully is nothing. Izuku then felt Eri's arms around his mid-stomach. She was sleeping happily at his side. He then turned his head towards his mom and he could see the bags under her eyes. Mom, you need to sleep. I promise I won't go anywhere. Inko shook his head but he insisted. Mom, I bet you haven't slept since you got here, and that was 2 days ago. Please take a nap on the other bed. I'll be fine. It took a little more but he finally convinced her to take a power nap. When he heard his mom snoring softly, he finally let himself sag completely on his bed, being careful to not wake up Eri. For a while he stood there watching the ceiling, thinking of his uncertain future. This is taking me nowhere, I need a distraction. He reached towards the left side table only to sigh in frustration. Of course, no left hand. He made a shadow clone to pass him his cell phone. He couldn't move a lot after all with Eri hugging him. Her mom must have turned it off. Izuku quickly understood why his mom did that. As soon as the phone booted, it started vibrating like crazy. Izuku almost dropped it but was happy that he had it in vibration mode almost all the time, or it would have wakened up his mom and Eri. Okay, I'm avoiding social media for now, Izuku said, looking at the +999 notification on all his social media apps. Then he opened the messages and he couldn't stop the smile from appearing on his face. He had a lot of messages from his classmates. Okay, so I have more than 1,000 messages between Kirishima, Ishido, Tsuyu, and Ochako. I need to contact them soon. He saw messages from almost everyone in the class, and he couldn't help to raise an eyebrow at the single message from Bakugo. Bakugo. You better not give up after losing an arm, nerd, or I swear to God that I'll rip out your other arm and then kill you. You can't give up before I kick your ass. Izuku was really confused about how Bakugo knew about his internal turmoil. How did he know that? And is he giving me encouraging words or just being an asshole? Izuku shook his head and decided to not open that can of worms right now. Then he noticed another single message, but this time from Todoroki. Todoroki. Midoriya, I hope you're all right now, smiley face. Sorry I couldn't be there to help you. There were complications in the middle of the city. I will tell you about it when we see each other again. Be safe. Izuku couldn't decide if the alright comment was a joke or not. He just sent him a message saying that he is better now and he'll see him in school. Pistachio, strawberry with a cherry on top. Pistachio added Uraraka Ochako and Asui Tsuyu to the group. Pistachio. Hey guys, I added Ochako and Tsuyu to our group. I guess it's faster than sending each of you a message. Strawberry. Midori. Cherry. Midora bro. Thank God, I was about to go to Hosu and search for you in every hospital. Strawberry. Aizawa just told us that you were fine but nothing else. Uraraka Ochako. Izuku. How are you? Do you need something? I can take a train to Hosu right now. Asui Tsuyu. Aren't you like 800 kilometers away from where Izuku is, Kiro? I'm happy to hear from you, Izuku. Sorry if this is a dumb question, but how are you? Pistachio. That's not a dumb question, Tsuyu. I'm recovering. My energy is still low and my body hurts, but I'll get better soon. Uraraka Ochako. I'll float the 800 kilometers right now if he needs me. I'm glad that you're okay. The fight on the news looked terrible. Cherry. You were really manly, Midora bro. Strawberry. Kirishima broke his cell phone watching the news. I'm pretty sure that I would have melted mine too, but I was in the living room. Cherry. She just melted her father's couch. Strawberry. No one asked you that. Asui Tsuyu. I'm happy that you're recovering, Kiro. I didn't destroy anything. I have a lot of control over my strength. Izuku could feel how everyone was trying to avoid the three-legged elephant in the room, so he decided to break it to them. Pistachio. By the way, I need your help. I don't know if Todoroki was joking or not. Izuku sent the screenshot of Todoroki's message and it devolved into a discussion of what he meant. For a while, he couldn't help but laugh at his friend's antics. Uraraka Ochako. Now that you brought that up, how are you feeling about your new situation? I'm sorry if I'm being insensitive, but I don't know how to phrase it. Asui Tsuyu. And they call me Blunt Kiro. Uraraka Ochako. I'm sorry. Pistachio. No, is all right. I'm fine mostly. I'm not going to lie and tell you that it's not shocking, but I hope I'll get better. Cherry. You'll be man, nothing will stop you from moving forward. Izuku felt the guilt gripping his heart. He didn't have it in him to tell his friend that he is questioning everything at the moment. His turmoil was stopped by his phone vibrating. It was a call from Ochako. Hey, I'm really sorry if I was insensitive, Izuku chuckled. Don't worry about it, you weren't. It's difficult, to be honest with you, but I'll handle it. Ochako was silent for a few moments. You don't sound so sure about that, Izuku grimaced and chuckled sadly. You noticed that, huh? He sighed sadly. I just don't know. This put a massive obstacle on my road to be a hero. I know I can, but it will be an uphill battle. But the support department is making you a prosthetic already. Principal Nezu told us. Yes, he told me that and I'm grateful, but with the way my power works, it'll still be difficult, you know. Izuku sighed again. He couldn't explain that the prosthetic wouldn't work with his chakra, at least not over a phone call. You can do it. Izuku raised an eyebrow at her earnest tone. We may know each other for little time, but I know in my heart that if someone can overcome something like this, is you. But what if I can't? He could feel the pout of Ochako from the phone. Nope, you can. You're going to be the best hero ever no matter what. Izuku chuckled softly. I don't think I can top All Might, Ochako. You can do it. So, get up. I believe in you. Izuku's smile widened. I don't know if I can right now. Wait, Izuku took a picture of Eri hugging him and sent it to Ochako. I have a unicorn latched on my side. Oh. She is precious. Is she your little sister? Izuku then flinched knowing he messed up. Nobody knew about his fight with Overhaul. Yeah, something like that, Izuku whispered. What do you mean? Izuku then told her everything, about how he came across her and his fight against Overhaul and his men, the problems he had with the police, and his hero permit. So, you went to investigate a small drug circle, then followed them and found out they were making deals with the Yakuza, who were using the precious girl at your side to create quirk erasing bullets, so you decided to beat them all up, and save her, and then you got a special hero permit and adopted her, all that in your first mission. I mean, you probably skipped a few steps, but yeah, that summed it up pretty well. Ochako was silent for a good minute. Izuku even checked that the call wasn't cut. Did you beat the ever-living shit of those bastards? Izuku's eyes widened at her language. Yeah, I did. Good. Now give me a moment while I freak out. Again, Izuku had to wait for a few minutes while hearing Ochako lose her mind on the other side of the line. I'm back. You're really something else, you know that, Izuku. I've been told. Izuku chuckled. His tone turned grave again. Ochako, do you know anything about Tenya? He heard her sigh. He is still in the medical wing. All we know is that he is recovering quickly, but he is kind of detained. Izuku raised an eyebrow, and Ochako took his silence as a sign to give more information. He went to attack Stain without permission and it was televised. Aizawa told us he is on the verge of being expelled. The only thing that is saving him is that the media and most people understand his motives. After all, Ingenium is a really loved hero. Izuku took a deep breath. Iida was in a really serious mess, more than he thought before. I hope he can stay with us, Izuku said. I hope that too. He messed up, but I like to think everyone deserves a second chance. Izuku couldn't agree more. They kept talking for a while. Ochako talked about everything but his immediate situation and he was happy for the distraction. When they finally broke up after Izuku's 100 promises of seeing her soon, he stood again watching the ceiling immersed in his thoughts when a voice brought him back. Can you tell me what are you doing there lying on a bed? Izuku's head snapped towards the window, a smile blossoming on his face. Fukusa-sensei, he whispered. Well, why are you not answering my question, Izuku? I'm recovering. Izuku said, confused. No, you're being lazy, boy. Why haven't you changed into Sage mode to heal the rest of your injuries? Izuku raised an eyebrow. The doctor said I needed to rest. Of course, he would say that, but he is neither a shinobi nor a sage, right? Fukusa-sensei raised an eyebrow. So please tell me, why are you there lying on your bed feeling sorry for yourself? Izuku sighed and raised his left arm. Again, Fukusa-sensei only looked at him questioningly. I lost an arm, sensei. I like to think I deserve a little rest, Izuku shouted. Of course, you would deserve a rest if you were just doing that, but you're not just resting, you're drowning yourself in sorrow. Fukusa's tone turned softer. Izuku, I know you since you were a small child. I know that even with all your gifts you're prone to doubt yourself when you encounter a big wall to climb. Do you remember when you couldn't even feel natural energy? Izuku did remember. Those 3 months left him frustrated and insecure of himself. He almost dropped sage training altogether. You're better now. After all, you've overcome mountains to get where you're, and the small walls you've encountered since mastering your powers weren't that much of a challenge. Until now. Izuku just stared at his stump angry. Gamabu went to get me from Mt. Myobokuzen and explained to me what happened. Izuku, you fought another sage. That simple feat is something extraordinary, but not only that you won that fight. Izuku, son, if that fight would have occurred in the age of the shinobi, it would have turned you into a legend. I know you feel bad about how it ended, but it was a necessity. I don't think anyone short of All Might or Endeavor could have stopped him. Yes, you lost an arm. Honestly, after a fight against another sage, I call it a good outcome. Izuku chuckled bitterly. I didn't just lose an arm, sensei. I lost most of my techniques. Izuku felt actually insulted when Fukusa-sensei blew a raspberry at him. You're exaggerating, Izuku was about to shout when Fukusa-sensei raised a hand to stop him and then pointed at Inko and Eri. What I meant is that you didn't just lose your techniques, you just need a new way to use them. What is the fundament of all your techniques? Manipulating, transforming, and molding my chakra to combine with the elements. Exactly, you just need to use that to create a new technique that helps you in this predicament. Izuku was confused, what his sensei was saying didn't make any sense. I can't use the seals to do that, sensei. That's the problem, Fukusa-sensei sighed. Your Rasengan uses seals. Izuku shook his head. When you use Hiraishin you use any seals to teleport to your marks. Izuku narrowed his eyes in concentration, then his eyes widened. Do you think is possible? Izuku whispered and Fukusa-sensei grinned and nodded. The old frog could see the gears in his student's mind moving at incredible speeds. Yes, that's the look I love to see on your face, Izuku. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow we have training. Izuku didn't answer and Fukusa knew Izuku wouldn't get any sleep soon, but the determined look on his freckled face made it impossible to get mad at him. Tagata Mirio was showering after a long afternoon of training with Sir. He was having trouble combining permeation and one for all, but Sir was confident that he just needed more time to get accustomed to his new powers. Part of him was still doubtful about taking the quirk. After all, he was really proud of how far he got with his own quirk, but being chosen by All Might and the encouraging words of Sir helped bury his doubts. He watched himself into the mirror of his bathroom and sighed. I can do this. I managed to master my quirk. A quirk so complicated that it can kill me if I screw up. Of course, I can do this. He then noticed a drop of blood falling from his nose and raised an eyebrow. Suddenly from the corner of his eye, he could swear that he saw the alarmed face of a woman. He turned quickly and saw no one there. That was weird, Mirio said while cleaning his nose. Sitting on his bed in the medical ward of UA. Tenya looked outside the window. The conversation he had yesterday with Principal Nezu and Aizawa-sensei, still repeating in his mind. Flashback. The only reason that you're not outright expelled is because Manuel was kind enough to tell the public and the commission that he gave you orders to defend yourself. Us expelling you will drag Manuel's good intention in the mud. Aizawa sighed. Look, Iida, I get it. Losing someone important to you, the rage, the sadness, all of it, I get it. And that is the only thing making me not put you in general studies. Tenya looked up at his teacher with hope in his eyes. You're young and grieving, but don't misunderstand. You are on really thin ice. As far as I'm concerned, you're on 2 strikes. Tenya nodded quickly and turned toward Nezu. You'll have to take counseling with Hound Dog, and give me a 50-page essay on vigilantism that I'll evaluate until I consider it enough. For a second Tenya thought that it wasn't that bad, only to look at the scared face of Aizawa. I'll be very meticulous while evaluating you. Tenya almost asked to be expelled when he saw Aizawa mutter a prayer. Tenya shook his head and decided to ask for new information. Do you have any news about Midoriya? He saw both their faces drop. We don't. We're about to travel to the hospital to check on him. Don't worry, if I know something about Izuku, is that he is way too stubborn to stay down. Aizawa smiled softly for just a second. Take it easy. You dodged death by less than an inch. Stay in bed. Your internship with Manuel is over, so that gives you almost a week to recover. If you need more, tell recovery girl to send me a message. With his part said, both left his room. End flashback. So, there he was looking outside the window just thinking about his decisions and how he could have been a better hero in training in person. Do I even have the right to call myself a hero in training anymore? Tenya muttered to himself. From what I heard, you're still a student. So I say you do, a very familiar voice said beside him. Tenya's eyes widened, and almost jumped out of bed when he turned around and saw Izuku sitting on the chair beside him with a smug grin on his face. Izuku, Tenya whispered. Hey man, I'm glad you're okay. Izuku's smug smile softened. Tenya was about to say something when his eyes landed on his friend's amputated arm. He couldn't stop the whimper coming out of his throat. Oh Izuku, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It is my fault that you're in that situation. The tears fall as waterfalls through his face. He was quickly enveloped in a tight hug. Please don't comfort me, I don't deserve it at all. Tenya refused to touch his friend. If you don't hug me, I'm not going to let you go, and believe me, we'll look awkward as hell. Izuku shouted whispered, but still, Tenya didn't move. Izuku sighed. It would make me feel amazing to receive a hug from my friend you know. A few seconds later Tenya was hugging him tightly. That has to be cheating, the brunette whispered. Izuku, I know I don't deserve it but please forgive. Tenya was cut by Izuku karate chopping his head from behind, and his arms were suddenly empty. Is done I forgive you, don't duel about it, Tenya shook his head. My mistakes made your journey to be a hero more difficult. I can't just stop thinking about that. Tenya raised his voice. You still think I can be a hero? Izuku asked with an eyebrow raised. I know you well enough to know that something like this wouldn't stop you, Tenya said shaking his head tears still rolling down his face. The thought of me being the reason for this new hardship is too much. You didn't ask me to be there, you didn't force me to go there to help, you didn't even give me permission to put a seal on you and I did. Izuku pointed out. Tenya, all I did was on my own volition and some of them against your wishes. In all honesty, you should be mad at me. You saved my life and the lives of the other victims, I could never be mad at you. Then let's call it even. Izuku smiled widely. At first Tenya stared at Izuku in shock but a few moments later he could help but shake his head fondly. You're impossible my friend. Tenya suddenly frowned. No, even if you forgive me for your arm. Even if I think he deserved it. You had to stain your hands. Izuku raised a hand to stop him. Iida, don't go there. Izuku took a deep breath. Okay, listen, what I will tell you is a big secret. Some people know about it, mostly our teachers, and Kirishima and Ishido know about it too. I was planning to tell you and Uraraka about it soon but you need to hear it right now. And then Izuku started to tell him about the story of his power, how he found Minato's cave, without mentioning younger Bakugo's bullying. He told him about Fukusa-sensei, his training in chakra, and how Stain somehow managed to get access to it. When he finished Tenya's eyes almost popped out of his sockets. Crazy story. I know, Izuku said scratching his head. Yes, but I trust you, Tenya whispered. Now you understand part of the reasons I did what I did. Izuku grimaced a little. He would have been unstoppable, Tenya whispered. The means the police and Hero Commission have to stop criminals would have been nothing to him. Izuku nodded at him. Yeah, he needed to be stopped. I don't like it. I wish I were stronger to somehow do it in another way. Izuku sighed, but I can't change the decision I took. I have to learn to live with it. If you allow me, I'll be glad to share the burden with you Midoriya my friend. Izuku smiled softly at Tenya. Thanks, Tenya, it's a promise. Izuku was on his feet again. Now that I think about it, to do that you'll have to become a hero. Izuku said with a hand on his chin. You can't take it back Iida. Izuku smirked. I fell directly into that one huh? Tenya chuckled. Is a promise, my friend. Good. Now there are still 5 days of internship that I plan on using to create something, so I guess I'll see you in 5 days in class. Izuku jumped up from his bed and took a step towards the door but suddenly stopped. Wait, I still need to do something. Izuku turned around and walked towards Tenya who raised an eyebrow. Izuku poked his forehead harshly. Recover quickly, we're training as soon as we have time. Tenya nodded slowly confused at Izuku's sudden declaration. I was hoping we could do that. Izuku nodded. Good. That's good planning right there Iida see you soon. Tenya couldn't help but notice the mischievous glint in Izuku's eyes while he teleported away. What the? Tenya's eyes widened in urgency. He started tapping his bedside table looking for something when he heard the doorknob moving. No, wait. Tenya sweetheart I brought you dinner. No mom wait I can explain. Iida Tenya, explain to me right now, where did you get the tattoo from? His mom yelled pointing at the Horatian seal on his forehead. Tenya was speechless. God damn it Midoriya, Tenya muttered under his breath. Language, young man. Izuku appeared in Nezu's office who was chuckling while looking at his tablet. Something funny, sensei? Izuku asked smiling. You could say that, Midoriya. Would you consider an occasional job giving punishments to rowdy students? Izuku just chuckled. I would think about it sensei. You seem in a better mood Izuku, Nezu said softly. Yeah, I have a goal now sensei. That's why I came to ask for the next 5 days of our internship together, Nezu nodded. You're going somewhere to achieve this goal then? Yes. I'm going to MT. Myobokuzen with Fukusa-sensei. We have a really crazy idea, but I think I can do it. Nezu looked at the brightness in Izuku's eyes and couldn't help but smile looking at the renewed fire in his pupil. I'll allow it, Midoriya, but you'll have to be back in 5 days to give your statement to the press. Izuku visually shuddered. Worry not. The interviewer will be Toshinori's favorite. She is good at her job, doesn't prod more than it needed and goes straight to the point. And it'll be broadcasted into an internet social thingies. Izuku couldn't help but laugh at that. Somewhere else All Might sneezed. I'll see you in a few days, sensei. Wait for me, Izuku smirked. Please don't be late, Midoriya. Nezu smiled and saw Izuku nod and teleport away. 5 days later. He's late, Eraserhead said with his usual bored tone. He, All Might, and Nezu were in the back of the classroom that was going to be used to conduct the interview. He looked towards the small sofas in front of the cameras and crew who seemed a little annoyed. He was supposed to be here half an hour ago. Nezu scratched his head. Did Mrs. Midoriya tell you anything, Yagi? All Might turned off his phone. No, she doesn't know why he is late. She is coming here right now. Apparently, the small frog that lives with them wants to tell us something. Aizawa held his head with one hand and muttered, of course, the frog knows something. A few moments later the door opened and Inko along with Eri and Gamabu entered the room. Ah, Mrs. Midoriya, I'm glad you could join us. Nezu said. Inko smiled nervously. Yeah, sorry we got lost. Your school is a maze. Gamabu, please tell them what you know. The small frog on Eri's shoulder started signing quickly. All Might looked confused but Nezu and Aizawa nodded in understanding. So, what did the small one say? All Might asked. First, her name is Gamabu. Secondly, she said that Izuku lost track of time getting accustomed to his new technique. Apparently his training was a success but he still needs to practice a lot. Ah, my bad, I'm sorry. Young Gamabu. The small frog nodded at the number one hero. So we don't know when is he coming back. All Might sighed but Gamabu started signing again. Not necessarily. Apparently Gamabu can summon him, but she needs permission to do it. Izuku could take his summoning as a prank and that would make Gamabu break her rules. Nezu nodded in understanding. All Might was just confused. Well, I, as his homeroom teacher and sensei of Midoriya Izuku, give you permission to summon him here. The three teachers raised an eyebrow looking at the smirk on the small toad's face. They saw in wonder how Gamabu started to make seals as Izuku did, and then suddenly she slapped her paw on the ground and with a smoke explosion Izuku appeared in the middle of them, without a shirt and covered in dirt. He seemed to be sleeping. Before anyone could say anything Gamabu signed quickly again. Aizawa smirked. I allow it. Nezu snickered and before anyone could ask Gamabu spit a stream of water at Izuku's face who jumped startled with his arms raised. Wah, where how I don't. Eri crashed into his leg. I missed you. Izuku seemed to snap out of his funk and smiled at the small girl. Eri, you saw me yesterday, Izuku said softly. Eri didn't say anything, just hugged him tighter. Izuku then narrowed his eyes at Gamabu, so you decided to break the rules, huh? No, I allowed it. Izuku turned and his eyes widened. Sensei, All Might, Principal, what are you doing here? All Might laughed. Nezu snickered and Aizawa sighed. You're supposed to be a ninja. You need to be more aware of your surroundings, Midoriya, Aizawa said while Midoriya scratched his head nervously. Sorry, I was asleep. Then he frowned. So why you summoned me here? He felt Eri tugging at his pants. Izuku looked down and saw Eri pointing to the other end of the classroom where the camera crew and interviewer were looking at him entertained. The interview is today. He then looked at his dressing state. I'm half naked. This time the crew in the front of the classroom laughed fully. I'll be back in a minute. Suddenly a female in the front shouted at him. You have 30 seconds. Izuku screamed and teleported away, unconsciously taking Eri with him. 25 seconds later Izuku reappeared dressed in shorts, a t-shirt that had the kanji for single-handedly written in it, and a towel he was using to clean the dirt from his face. I'm ready. He then turned to his teachers who were looking at him strangely. What? Of all the shirts with words you had to choose that one, his mom said in an exasperated tone while picking up a smiling Eri who went on a quick adventure with Izuku. I thought it was funny. Suddenly a hand dragged him toward the front of the classroom. I'm glad you finally got here. I'm Takawa Sakura, and I'll be your interviewer today. Sorry to be this pushy but we are behind schedule. Izuku watched nervously as the black-haired woman dragged him to the front. I'm sorry. Don't be. Actually, when All Might called me I thought it was too soon to give your statement but they insisted. Something about you not having a lot of free time in the future. Izuku felt scared of what their teachers had planned for the coming months. When they got in front of the cameras, Izuku felt his nervousness spike to a dangerous degree for a second, only for a powerful feeling of easiness appear out of nowhere. He looked with a raised eyebrow at Takawa, who smiled softly at him. So you noticed it, huh? You're doing something to me. I'm not as nervous anymore. Izuku raised an eyebrow, not mad but genuinely curious. My quirk allows me to calm people. Only to a state of tranquility that let you think clearly. Izuku's eyes shone. That's an amazing quirk. Have you ever considered being a hero? You could help in a lot of situations. A lot of villains are people that have their minds in a bad place. You could calm them and they most probably surrender. Also in hostage situations you could calm the villains to make them think clearly about what are they doing. Also if you take the rescue route. I thought about it, but I love what I do. I wanted to interview heroes since I was a kid, so here I am. Oh, I'm sorry. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Don't worry, actually I have to thank you. Most people won't think that my quirk would be useful. In heroics, Izuku felt his blood boil for a second. That's ridiculous. Everyone can be a hero if they put their heart into it. Takawa smiled softly. That's an amazing way to start an interview, Midoriya. Izuku was confused. He then turned towards the cameras. He noticed the red light above them on. You should have told me. Izuku felt at peace but couldn't help the whining in his tone. Don't worry about it. What about we start with the questions? Izuku raised an eyebrow. Don't you have to ask my name and all that? Takawa chuckled. Well, we had 30 minutes to give a small debrief of you, Midoriya. Izuku slumped into his seat and muttered an apology. Now let's start with the first question. Why did you want to be a hero? That question took Izuku by surprise. He expected to dive into Stain's situation quickly. Not a question like that. He thought for a few moments before answering. I want to save people with a smile. I want to become someone people would turn to and feel safe. I want to create a world where people understand that there's always hope, Izuku said, smiling softly. A really good answer, Midoriya. I like to think that the majority of the people of Japan feel that you can do it. After all, everyone is still amazed by your feats. You won first place at the sports festival, and even if it was an awful situation, you managed to come victorious in your battle with the S-ranked villain Stain. Izuku just nodded. Tell me, Midoriya, why did you decide to engage with Stain? Izuku took a deep breath. Here we go, keep it simple, Izuku. When I saw the situation in Hosu, I just wanted to help. People were in danger, also my friend who was in his internship in Hosu was in danger. What other reason I needed to intervene? Takawa nodded. Well, the pro-heroes and your friend who was on the scene must be thankful for your decision. I like to think they are, Izuku chuckled. I'm pretty sure they are, Midoriya. Now, from what we saw in the sports festivals, you use some form of teleportation. I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Why not teleport the injured then get the hell out of there yourself? Izuku chuckled and scratched his head. My technique for teleporting has limitations. I can make it instant when I teleport myself short distances, but the more the distance the more time I take. When I need to teleport someone it requires time. Teleport someone to a distant place requires more time. If you saw the fight against Stain you could see easily that he didn't exactly give me time for that. Yeah, from what we caught, he was fast, she said. Fast is not even close to what he was. The only way I managed to keep up with him was teleporting, and as I say, close-range teleporting is instant. Izuku knew that praising a villain's skill wasn't his best idea, but remembering how terrifying Stain, he just couldn't help it. Now the hardest part of the interview. You had to take a really difficult decision and you certainly pay the price for it. She signaled Izuku's left arm. What told you that you make the right decision? It wasn't. A silence overcame the room. It wasn't the best decision. It was the only one I could make that meant to stop the killings. Taking Stain's life wasn't something I did because it was the right action. It's something I did because I had no other choice. I knew that I wouldn't be at peace knowing that he'll recover, and when the time comes again more innocent will die to his blade. It was the hardest decision of my life. I wish that I could have made something different, but I wasn't strong enough to stop him in any other way. So I decided that if drowning in guilt was the price to pay for saving countless lives, well, Izuku let his words linger. You're so young to carry that weight in your heart, Midoriya. Izuku looked at Takawa, who looked sad for him. We're training to be heroes. My sensei always told me that being a hero isn't flowers and rainbows, people's lives are on the line. Every decision you take can change the situation between the life and death of innocence. A little cold there, Midoriya. I like to call it logical. Izuku smirked, looking at Aizawa, who nodded solemnly. I see, Midoriya, be honest with me. After your injury, what is your next step? What are you talking about this? Izuku raised his left arm. Nothing but a flesh wound, don't worry about it. So you plan to keep being a hero student after all this? A lot of people would not want to continue through this path after losing an arm. And I like to think that a lot of people would agree with me that you earned a rest. Is more like a third of an arm, Izuku muttered. As I said, the world is cruel and unforgiving. But if I let something like this keep me down, my reasons to be a hero would be nothing but words. Also, my fellow students from the support department are helping me by building a prosthetic for me. Izuku smiled widely. Now that you mention it, you are just a hero student. Did you have permission to act in Hosu? Izuku smiled softly. He knew that she knew about his hero permit, and he was grateful for how quickly she changed the topic of Stain. Well, I have a special hero permit actually. Oh, and what does that mean? Well, it means that I somehow managed to impress two heroes enough to put their necks in the line for me. Takawa smiled knowingly. Well, we'll love to talk with the heroes that have their faith in you. A booming laugh was the last thing he heard before Izuku turned his brain into autopilot and let his teachers take the interview from him. He would happily admit that he cried when both his teachers said that they were proud and don't regret giving Izuku his permit. Izuku watched intently the interview. He wanted to learn how to answer quickly and briefly like them. Izuku knew the interview was about to end when Takawa finally asked All Might what was surely the most asked question. All Might, why did you decide to sponsor Midoriya? All Might sighed heavily. As much as I don't want to admit it, my time as a pro hero is going to end sooner or later. After all, I'm just a man and I'm not getting younger. Young Midoriya and I had a conversation and he pointed out something that stuck with me. He said that he wanted to take some of the weight off my shoulders. I thought that if a young man wanted to help me, what kind of symbol of peace I am if I don't do the same by giving him a helping hand. And I plan to keep doing it with more young heroes. It's time for me to take a more serious role in the future of heroics. All Might sent a thumbs up to the camera. The future seems brighter knowing that you have so much faith in the younger generation of heroes. All Might. Takawa turned to Izuku one last time. Midoriya, any last words for the people? Izuku thought for a few moments. How much he dreamed of being a hero even when no one was on his side, and finally smiled at the camera. Dreams save us. Dreams lift us and transform us. And on my soul, I swear, until my dream of a world where hope would never waver becomes a reality we all share. Izuku stood up and put his fist up. I'll never stop fighting. In a bar on Kamino, Tamura scratched his neck furiously. First, the League of Villains has barely been mentioned in the news thanks to Stain, and now everyone was looking at All Might's protege, making his efforts null as their involvement in the attack of Hosu was completely overlooked now. I don't like it, I hate him. Tamura growled. Please refrain from dusting our home, Shigaraki Tamura, Kurogiri said, a little exasperated. I need a new plan. Yes, a new approach to this situation, Tamura practically hissed. Yes, I know what I have to do. Kurogiri called Jiren. We need to talk business. Kurogiri nodded and saw Tamura leave towards his room. What do you think, sensei? Kurogiri asked. I don't think he is the next holder if that's what you're asking, Kurogiri. A voice came from the computer in the room. He is stronger than he was when we invaded UA. A hum was the only sound that came out of the computer for a while. Then, the growth of Shigaraki has to be speed up. Kurogiri shivered at the sound of that. He already failed twice. Let us see what he'll do with his third and last chance. In the meantime, I have to contact an old project of mine. Keep me informed, Kurogiri. After that, the line went dead. Shigaraki Tamura, whatever you're planning, you better succeed. You already had one more chance than the others had before Sensei got rid of them. To Ochako, saying that today was a roller coaster of emotions was an understatement. Finally getting back from internships was good. A little normalcy from the school was what she needed, or at least that's what she thought until she saw her blue-haired friend in the classroom. A big part of her was happy that he returned to class. A smaller part of her was mad with Iida for what he did, and for a second debated with herself if throwing him to the sun would make her feel better. She was about to talk to him when the cap he was wearing on his head made her stop. He then turned towards her, bowed deeply, and apologized. The small part of her that was mad at him evaporated in a second and she quickly gave him a hug. She still was confused by the cap. When Aizawa arrived and told Iida to lose the hat, everyone laughed at the seal on his forehead, even Aizawa-sensei seemed to hide a smile into his scarf. Ochako laughed knowing that Izuku probably put the seal on his face as a punishment of sorts. After the normal classes, they went to a rescue scenario with All Might. She managed to win first place in her group, which made her happy. Then she got nervous when the teachers mentioned the finals were in 2 weeks. So Ochako walked towards his apartment with conflicting emotions in her heart. She was really happy about winning the exercise that her teachers put them through. On the other side, she couldn't stop the nervousness in her heart thinking about the finals, and finally, Izuku's absence throughout the day made her feel really sad. I know he said he was doing all right. Okay, I can't say that without imagining the smirk on Todoroki's face. She shook her head. I know he said he was okay, but still want to see him. Ochako muttered. He looked to the sky, took a deep breath, and whispered, I want to see you. Who do you want to see? Ochako screamed when she heard Izuku's voice behind her. No one, no one. My duck pet back in Mie. Izuku raised an eyebrow while looking at her crimson-red face. Huh, you never talked about a duck pet. Better show me some pictures later. Izuku smirked but then froze when a pair of arms wrapped around him. I'm so happy to see you. Izuku wasn't sure if she could hear the erratic beating of his heart. I'm happy to see you too. I'm sorry for not coming sooner. Akako's face heated again when Izuku started to pet her head with his right hand. Don't worry about it, I know you have to take a rest. Thank you for keeping me informed by messages though. She then turned her head a little towards Izuku's left arm and cringed. I'm so sorry you had to go through something so horrible. Izuku shrugged. A little sacrifice like this means nothing if I get to save one of my friends. Izuku hugged her a little tighter. I don't mind staying like this all day, but I want to talk to you about something kind of important. Ochako hesitated for a second. For some reason she really didn't want to break the hug, but after a couple of seconds she took a deep breath, hugged him tighter, and took a couple of steps back. Her heart swelled when Izuku didn't release her hand. What I'm about to tell you, you're probably not going to believe me. I trust you, Izuku. If you say you're telling me the truth, I trust you. Ochako interrupted him. Izuku smiled softly at her. Okay, let's move to a more secure place. Before Ochako could ask where they were going, both of them stood in the middle of a forest. I said that I trust you, Izuku, but why are we in the middle of the forest? Ochako looked around confused. Welcome to MT. Myobokuzen Ochako, home of the toads and the place where I trained. Ochako had a lot of questions but decided to wait until Izuku explained himself. Both walked in silence, Izuku enjoying the face Ochako made to everything around them. When they finally entered a clearing, they were received by a beautiful sight. Eri was running around chasing Gamabu. The small toad who normally didn't show any expression right now seemed happy. Eri's laughing behind it was like fresh air in the hot summer. On the left side, Inko was having tea with Fukusa-sensei and his wife Sakura. Let me introduce you to my family, Ochako. She just nodded. Well, you already know Eri and Gamabu. The beautiful woman with the green hair is my mom, Midoriya Inko. She is having tea with my sensei and his wife. Your sensei? Ochako raised an eyebrow. Are you talking about the talking toad? Izuku laughed. Yeah, most of the toads that you find here can talk, so don't say anything about them because they most likely understand you. Ochako nodded slowly. Yeah, Fukusa-sensei taught me a lot of what I know. He teach you how to use your quirk. Izuku turned a little bit serious. That's the thing, Ochako, I'm quirkless. Izuku, I've seen you spit fire. You teleport more than you walk. All those feats are not because of a quirk. Ochako looked confused. Then how do you do all that? Izuku took her hand again and pulled her to sit down in front of him. He was grateful that she didn't release his hand. I use chakra. Ochako didn't say anything, prompting him to keep talking. It all began when I was 4 years old, the day the doctor said that I was quirkless. And then again, Izuku recalled his story, the broken dreams, the bullying, Minato's cave, his first steps awakening his chakra, his failures, how he told his mom everything, the meeting with Fukusa-sensei and his training. Finally, he talked about his fight with Stain and why he went to those lengths. Meanwhile, Ochako just listened silently, her brown eyes never leaving his green ones. And that's my story. I know it's difficult to believe That it sounds like something out of a manga, but that is my life. Izuku chuckled a little and stopped talking, waiting for Ochako to say something. Instead, he was tackled to the ground and manhandled by a hug that he was pretty sure was a move she learned from Gunhead to knock someone out. Thank you for trusting me with your story. She took a step back while Izuku took a deep breath. You're more amazing than I thought, Izuku. You think so? Izuku wheezed. The world gave you a bad hand to play and you said, not today, bitch, and learned how to use a forgotten power, from a book nonetheless. And you became one of the strongest people I know. And you're still growing stronger. This could be a kick-ass movie. Thank you, Ochako, for not seeing me differently. Don't be dumb, of course, I see you differently. Izuku frowned a little. I admire you even more now. You're putting the bar way too high. Izuku's laugh and Akako's exclamations finally drew attention from Eri and Inko, who were the only ones that didn't notice the teens talking at the entrance of the clearing. Eri ran with all the might her little legs could muster and missile herself toward Izuku, who caught her easily. Izuku, you're back. She screamed, hugging him tightly. You saw me like 2 hours ago, Eri. Izuku laughed softly. Too much. Eri turned to Ochako and her shy nature flared. Who is she? Ochako used all her strength to not giggle at the failed attempt of whispering Eri did. Let me introduce you, Eri. This is my dear friend Uraraka Ochako. Eri narrowed her eyes in concentration. Both teens could practically see the gears in her small brain moving. And suddenly something must have clicked because her eyes widened in recognition. The one you called the most beautiful girl. Izuku quickly put a hand on her mouth. Eri. Don't know what you're talking about, Eri. I didn't say anything ever. Izuku's face fired up while he talked extremely fast. Ochako wasn't doing any better. Thankfully his mom came to the rescue. So, you're Uraraka. My Izuku talks a lot about you. Never mind, his mother came to dig his grave deeper. I'm glad I finally get to meet you. Ochako regained his bearings a little and bowed deeply. The pleasure is mine, ma'am. Izuku means a lot to me too. A bit of silence. I mean, talks to me a lot too. Another bit. A pleasure to meet you, ma'am, she said with a squeaky voice. Call me Inko, dear, but please come to the table. We're having tea. Both teens walked robotically towards the table while Eri was enjoying herself playing with Izuku's hair. So, you two finally decided to join us, huh? Fukusa-sense said, smirking. Leave them alone, Fukusa. They must have been having a really important conversation. His wife Sakura scolded him. Please, dear, take a seat, Sakura said while offering Ochako a cup of tea. If you're hungry, I can prepare you something quick. She's not hungry. Izuku interfered and sent a wide-eyed look toward Ochako. I ate a little bit before. Izuku, bring me here, thank you, Ochako said, trusting Izuku. Are you sure? These roasted mealworms are really good. Akako's eyes widened when he saw Inko eating said worms. I'm good, thank you. So girly, I hope Izuku told you earlier, but everything you've seen is forbidden to any outsider who is not in a contract with a toad. Ochako turned towards Izuku's sensei. This place is sacred and hidden to the outside world. You being here is something we allowed exclusively because Izuku trusts you deeply. But I must emphasize the importance of keeping it a secret. Ochako nodded. I won't tell a soul, I promise. Fukusa stared deeply into Akako's eyes for a few moments as if he was seizing something. You managed to snatch a good one, Izuku. She is allowed to come here whenever she desires. I, as the chief of the Toads, grant her permission. Izuku's smile widened and nodded. I must go, I have a reunion to attend. Please make yourself at home. Izuku, remember we have training tomorrow, don't be late. Your training? Ochako asked. Yeah, but I can't tell you, it's a secret. He saw Eri walking slowly towards Ochako, her hands covering her mouth. You can't tell her either, Eri. Eri squeaked, surprised at being caught. Everyone laughed and continued talking for a while. Nobody could blame Ochako for asking a lot of questions to Sakura, who seemed excited to talk about the land of toads. After a while it was getting dark, it was time to say goodbye. I must insist that you visit us again, Ochako. You're a delight to be around. Next time I'm going to prepare a feast, so come with an empty stomach. Ochako saw Inko brighten up and Izuku make a quick prayer, leaving her intrigued and scared. I'll come back soon, I promise, Sakura. Told you to call me Ma. Ochako blushed. Yeah, I'll see you soon, Ma. After that everyone said their goodbyes, and Izuku teleported them to his house, after saying goodbye to Inko and Eri who wanted to accompany them but at the same time couldn't keep her eyes open. Both teens stood on the street in silence. You don't have a seal where I live, right? Ochako said. Of course, I don't. That would be a complete breach of privacy. Ochako raised her gloved hand first and then raised an eyebrow. That's different and you know it. She laughed loudly and started walking. I don't mind you putting a seal in my apartment, but I don't want to risk my landlord getting mad and kicking me out. Is a good place for a good price. Izuku nodded. How about you give me one of your kunai and I left it in my house in case of emergency. Izuku chuckled. You're the second person to ask me for a kunai. Really, who is the other one? Eri, did you not notice the kunai on her belt? Ochako focused a little. Wait, I thought that was a prop of a costume or something. Nope. I didn't want to put a seal on her and she asked for a kunai. Told her to be careful and to stab a bitch if necessary. Ochako giggled imagining the little girl throwing the kunai like Izuku. Both kept talking all the way to Akako's apartment, about everything and nothing, just enjoying their company. Finally, 30 minutes later both of them stood in front of her place. Guess I'll see you tomorrow, Ochako said happily while taking the kunai from Izuku's hand. Izuku sighed and shook his head. Not really, Ochako frowned. I'm getting my prosthetic tomorrow. Akako's eyes widened. Shouldn't you be resting? You're about to get surgery. Izuku chuckled. I have more than enough energy for the procedure, and with the healing quirks of the people in the hospital in my sage mode, the recovery will be quick. But I still have to get accustomed to it and train. Wait, Fukusa-sensei said you had training tomorrow. Izuku, you need to rest before surgery. No matter how strong or weird is your power, you need to rest. Izuku couldn't stop the small laugh that came out of his throat. The training I'm doing with Fukusa-sensei is not something that makes me lose much energy. Don't worry, I promise to not overwork myself tomorrow if that makes you feel better. Izuku smiled at her. Do you promise to take it easy? Izuku could never lie to those brown eyes of her. I promise. Ochako nodded satisfied and hugged him again. Izuku quickly wrapped his arms around her, and put his face on the crown of her head. Everything is going to be okay. I'll see you in a couple of weeks for the finals, I promise. I'll see you in a while then. Still, you need to keep messaging me, she said, taking a step back with a soft smile on her face. You bet I will. Say hi to everyone for me. Izuku turned and was about to flash away when Ochako stopped him. Ah, I almost forgot. You should probably move the seal from Ida's face. I know you are kind of punishing him and I agree, but the poor guy seems devastated. I'm pretty sure I saw him apologizing to the school rules and regulations book. Izuku laughed loudly. I'll think about it. I need to meditate if he has been punished enough, he said and then disappeared. The next day came and Izuku wasn't in class, but Iida walked proudly with his forehead clean and a new glove in his left hand. The written final exam was brutal. Almost everyone in 1A would accept that as a fact. But the practical exam was something akin to a nightmare. The murmurs in the halls make everyone believe that they would be facing robots like in the entrance exam. When they reached the field, all of his teachers were waiting for them. Apparently, they were deceived by the rumors, and their opponents for the practical exam would be their hero teachers. They were put in pairs and assigned one opponent with just one exception, Bakugo Katsuki, who was selected to fight another student. Bakugo was about to complain but stopped himself when Aizawa told him that the student was the strongest in the third year. The closest to be the next number one to Tagata Mirio. That seemed to fire something in Bakugo, who quickly told the third year that he was the real next number one. Tagata just laughed loudly and said that he loved his spirit. The battles were intense. Most of the students managed to snatch a victory except for Sato and Kirishima, who fell against Cementos, Mina, and Kaminari, who were overwhelmed by Nezu and Bakugo, who couldn't even scratch Tagata. Everyone was confused by him. He was untouchable and has the strength to break through buildings with ease. By the time their timer marked 0, Bakugo was bruised all over while Tagata seemed a little sick. Maybe a drawback of his quirk. Everyone was in the monitoring room waiting for their teachers to dismiss the class. Most of them were chatting, even the ones who failed. Only Bakugo was sulking in a corner. I guess he didn't recover quickly enough, Iida said sadly. I really miss him. I miss him too, but he promised that he would be here. I still trust him, Ochako said firmly. I mean, I hope so too, but he missed the exam, Kirishima said. If Midori told Ocha that he would be here, we should trust him. He would never lie to Ocha, Mina said, wiggling her eyebrows. Before Ochako could say anything, Aizawa appeared in front of them. We will have a talk about your performance tomorrow in class. Before you can go home, there is one exam left to be held. Everyone perked at that. Originally you wouldn't be seeing the exam, but the rat said it would be a good show for all of you. Now put attention to the screen. Aizawa pressed a button and asked, are you ready for the exam? Yes, I am. Izuku's voice sounded in the speakers. Everyone perked up but Iida, Kirishima, Ishido, Asui, Todoroki, and Uraraka actually stood up from their seats. Okay, for the final exam of the day, the screen changed and Izuku stood in the middle of the field waiting with a determined smile on his face. Midoriya Izuku versus. On the screen, everyone saw a missile crash in front of Izuku. All Might. XXX. Izuku couldn't stop the giddiness in his heart after seeing the amazing entrance of his idol, who broke the silence with his boisterous laugh. I am here to test you, young Midoriya. All Might exclaimed. Thank you for the opportunity, sensei. Izuku saw All Might deflate a little while looking at his prosthetic. Maybe he was worried it would be damaged in the fight. Don't worry too much, sensei. The support department really outdid themselves with this one. Izuku shivered a little, remembering how difficult it was to convince the pink-haired support student from adding a thermal blade or a guide missile launcher. Don't worry, young Midoriya, even if this is an exam, I'll do my best to not damage it, All Might said in a more serene tone. That won't be a problem. Izuku detached his arm and teleported it away with a smirk in the monitoring room. Mina almost fainted when Izuku's arm appeared in front of her. While I admire your determination, won't it be detrimental to your performance fighting with just one arm? Izuku smirked and showed the metal plate on which his prosthetic connects. It had a kanji written on it. Who says I'm going to fight one-armed? Izuku took a deep breath. I don't think I ever talked about it, but even if I don't use a lot of techniques of it, my elemental affinity is lightning. Is just that lightning element is so destructive that I normally don't use it in fights. Somewhere on the field, a shadow clone who was absorbing natural energy exploded, activating Izuku's Sage Mode. Lightning Style. Chakra Mode. All Might felt the hair on the back of his neck raise. I used these 2 weeks to create something to change that and use more of my lightning techniques. Is still pretty dangerous, but who better to test it out if not you, All Might? Izuku said, smirking. Lightning Style. Raiga. The sound of lightning being summoned was terrifying, not to mention the blinding white light. Still, All Might didn't let himself blink at the demonstration of power Izuku was giving him. His previously missing arm was no more. It was complete again. An arm formed by lightning was pointed directly at the symbol of peace. In the monitoring room, the silence was deafening. Nobody could make a noise. The silence was only broken when Aizawa tapped the button again. The rules for this match are different, Midoriya. You have to avoid being knocked out for 10 minutes to win. If you either knock out or capture All Might with the handcuffs, you also win. There is no escaping simulation in this match. Begin. Izuku leapt towards his teacher, closing the distance in a second. All Might quickly regained his bearings and blocked the right hook aimed at his face. Izuku quickly rotated his body and delivered a kick that pushed All Might a couple meters back, his feet digging into the dirt. Izuku didn't let him recover and leapt to the offensive again. Kicks and punches were either blocked or dodged by All Might, who didn't seem to be doing too bad but still wasn't able to catch a breath. Izuku sent a powerful strike with his left arm. All Might blocked it instead of dodging and he was sent flying a couple blocks away. Izuku saw him shaking his hand as if he burned it, then he laughed. Have to admit it, young Midoriya, the technique seriously packs a punch. Izuku smiled at the compliment. What do you say if we up this a notch? All Might launched himself towards Izuku, who met him in the middle, both their fists colliding, creating a powerful shockwave that broke the windows of all the buildings around them. That's what I'm talking about, let's do it. It was Izuku's turn to be in the defense and wait for an opening. All Might's flurry of strikes made Izuku feel like he was fighting a tornado. For every strike Izuku managed to get in, he received one in response. He really wanted to feel pride that he was fighting on the same level as the symbol of peace, but he couldn't after all. All Might had restraining braces in both his arms and legs. All Might punched Izuku in the gut, making him go through a building before he could follow. Izuku appeared in front of him smiling. All Might didn't notice the kunai buried in the ground in front of him. What do you say, All Might? Let's take this up another notch. All Might raised an eyebrow before his eyes widened. Rasengan. Izuku's attack hit All Might directly in the chest and the symbol of peace felt for the first time in 6 years how it feels to go through a bunch of buildings. All Might finally crashed into the ground and shook his head to regain his bearings. He then jumped towards Izuku who had a scroll in his hand. Before he could reach him, Izuku managed to open the scroll and put his hand on it. All Might's eyes widened looking at the web of seals that covered all the buildings and the floor around them. He turned towards Izuku to deliver a powerful punch, but he wasn't there anymore. His instincts screamed for him to dodge, so he did that and leapt away, barely avoiding a giant fireball that came from behind him. He couldn't take a breath when from his left a water dragon was about to hit him. All Might punched the dragon that exploded. The hit was so strong that it turned the dragon into rain. He was confused when the water started to gather above him and saw Izuku standing on a building, making movements with his hands, water style, needles of failing rain. All Might's eyes widened again when he heard that. He quickly covered himself as well as he could with his arms, most needles breaking upon contact with the mountain of All Might. Still, the few that pierced his skin made him grit his teeth in pain. When the rain finally stopped, All Might took a deep breath. All right, it seems that I have to be more serious with you, young Midoriya. All Might leapt towards Izuku who again disappeared. This time however All Might didn't stop his punch. The building was reduced to shambles with a single punch. Izuku was confused. What is All Might doing? He didn't need to destroy the building. I leapt away with enough time. Before he could think anything else, the symbol of peace was on top of him again, throwing a devastating punch that put a hole in the ground and made more buildings collapse. For a few moments that's all they did until Izuku reappeared again on one of the buildings All Might destroyed, only to be met with a powerful right hook that sent him flying away. What? How could he know? Before Izuku could think of anything, All Might was on him again. Every time Izuku disappeared, All Might was following him. Something finally clicked. He wasn't able to see me in time. Even if his speed with the restraints is amazing, he can't detect me like Stain did with the Sage mode, so he just destroyed everything, making a plain field, and buried my seals under the rubble. I have to admit, young Midoriya, you making me destroy most of the field was not something I was expecting when I came here, but you just don't stay still. You disappear and appear away from where we were fighting and I couldn't catch you quickly, All Might said while kicking a rock. Is he pouting? So, I had to take your stealth from you. All Might said again in his boisterous voice. Come on, young Midoriya, let's continue the battle between the symbol of peace and the future symbol of hope. Izuku could die at that moment, either from happiness or shame that All Might remembered what he said to him when he turned OFA down. Both hero and student leapt again against each other, Izuku using the few Horatian seals that weren't under rubble to send attack after attack towards All Might, who seemed to be enjoying himself too much. On one of their trades, Izuku marked All Might with a seal on his back and finally seemed to take the hero off guard, disappearing and appearing all over again, using everything in him to hit All Might and disappear before the hero could defend himself. To the people in the monitoring room at first, it seemed like All Might was throwing punches in the air. Only the small frames of Izuku punching, kneeing, or kicking All Might and disappearing half a second later stopped them from thinking that All Might lose his mind. A soft laugh caught everyone by surprise, only to be more surprised when they saw that Todoroki was the one laughing. Midoriya, my friend, I wanted to be on the same level as you, but we're not even playing the same game. The soft smile on Todoroki's face reassured everyone that he for some reason was happy for Izuku. On the other side, everyone took a step away from Bakugo, who seemed a second away to immolate himself. Back in the field, All Might was having an awful time. Okay, maybe I angered him by enjoying myself too much, but he can't blame me. It's been a long time since I got to fight someone at the same power level. After a particularly nasty punch from Izuku's lightning arm, All Might had enough. He ripped the braces from his arms and caught Izuku by the leg, whose eyes widened before being thrown away with way more strength than before. Okay, yeah, something is broken, Izuku said to himself in pain. He redirected natural energy towards his ribs. That left me with almost no natural energy nor chakra. He jumped back when All Might landed in front of him like a missile. Have to admit, young Midoriya, you're making me go beyond my limits is amazing. I'm pretty sure that you'll turn into a fine symbol in the future. All Might walked powerfully towards him. Even with all the bruises and thorn costume, All Might still could put the fear of God in anyone. Alright, what do you say? Round 3, young Midoriya. Before Izuku could say anything, a horn sounded in the distance and Aizawa's voice sounded in the field. It's been 10 minutes, Midoriya. Izuku, you have passed the test. All Might was about to say something but was interrupted by Aizawa. All Might, you are also disqualified for breaking the restraining braces. We put those for a reason. All Might looked at his arms and his eyes widened. When? Then he remembered the kick that surely loosened up some of his teeth. Yeah. I'm sorry young Midoriya, it seems that I got way too excited. He put his hands on his waist and laughed before a cough caught in his throat. Cut the camera. All Might said, panicking. Done, was the last thing both heard from Aizawa before All Might coughed a bunch of blood and returned to his small form. I severely misjudged our fight young Midoriya, the hero said while stumbling a little, only to be stopped by Izuku whose eyes again were green, and the lightning around him along with his arm were both gone. It seems that our fight took the 2 hours I had left for today. You're way more powerful than I thought young Midoriya. Izuku shook his head. Come on sensei, let's go to Recovery Girl. All Might shivered. I prefer if you let me here young Midoriya, I'm too young to die. Izuku laughed at his teacher's panic but still teleported them both to the heroine. While Recovery Girl was whacking them both with her cane, All Might couldn't stop grinning. Young Midoriya, you put me in check at my 60%. He really has no idea how amazing that feat is, and he is still growing. Knowing that Japan's future will rest in yours and young Togeda's hands made the thought of my retirement more bearable. Sir Shigaraki seems agitated. He is taking trips outside more often and forbids me to follow him. If you let me give my opinion, you should have a talk with him, said Kurogiri. AFO hummed at the strange kind of concern Kurogiri was showing. As I told you before Kurogiri, Shigaraki needs to step up on his journey to become the new symbol of evil. He is making a lot of mistakes lately. I don't like that. AFO could see something akin to concern in Kurogiri's yellow eyes. We'll talk about it later. Open a portal for Garaki. He seemed excited for some reason. Maybe a new Nomu, AFO said smirking cruelly. Kurogiri opened the portal and saw Garaki walk through it. He seemed giddy. He was about to close the portal when Garaki stopped him. Wait Kurogiri, don't close it. The honor guest is coming too. If AFO could make any expression he definitely would be raising an eyebrow. Let me introduce you to the only precept of deaths that wasn't imprisoned, Diodoro Sasaki. A man with black hair, dressed in a fur vest, and a white mask walked through the portal. He was drinking from a bottle of alcohol and carried a small cooler in his right arm. The man froze suddenly, knowing deep down he was in a dangerous place around very dangerous people. Garaki, you brought an alcoholic. AFO's presence inundated the room, making breath difficult. You more than anyone knows that I'm not fond of pranks. Drive. No master, please hear me out. Garaki screeched in panic. He has something that I'm sure will change our future. He prompted Diodoro to walk forward. Tell him, boy, tell him what you have in the cooler. Diodoro coughed, resisting the temptation to take a gulp from his bottle. Yeah, I worked for Overhaul and he was working on a project. The ominous presence of AFO flooded the room again. He was working in a way to erase quirks. He shouted in panic. I see, Garaki, I don't really understand the reason for this. The last thing I want to do is to erase quirks. The doctor raised his hands. Please master, let him finish. So yeah, he was working to do that. He was using the blood of a child who had a quirk that could rewind anything organic. The day Shi Hasaikai fell, I was in a bar drinking. When I came back to the quarter, everything was flooded with police and heroes. I managed to sneak in using a hidden entrance. Almost everything was being checked by them except for the blood samples, Diodoro said, raising his cooler a little. I took the samples and left quickly. Honestly, without the Shi Hasaikai I had nowhere to go, so I called Jiren, and explained that I needed someone who knows about biology or something to offer them the samples. Diodoro finished lamely. Is what this, gentleman, said True Garaki. AFO sounded different, excited. Before coming here he gave me a small sample of the blood. Garaki's eyes brightened. He is telling the truth. Whatever quirk gene those samples have, made the quirk user capable of rewinding any organic matter. AFO understood quickly why Garaki was so giddy. I see. Tell me, Diodoro, what do you want for those samples? The drunk shrugged. Not much. A place to stay and booze. AFO chuckled and Diodoro questioned how he was capable to make a chuckle so sinister. That's an easy demand. You have a home in my organization, Diodoro. AFO turned towards Kurogiri. Take him to the bar, Kurogiri. Don't let Tamura dust him. Before Diodoro could say anything, a portal teleported him away, not before Garaki took the samples from him. What do you say, doctor? Is it possible? Garaki couldn't remember the last time his master sounded so excited. With this amount of blood it will be difficult, but not impossible. If we had the owner of it I could do a lot more tests. But maybe if you let me use some of the amplifier quirk samples it would make the process easier. AFO's sinister smile widened before a chuckle escaped his throat. Please use whatever you need. If we don't have it already just ask for it and you'll get it. Garaki smirked and was about to ask to be teleported away when AFO stopped him. I'm sorry for seeming so desperate, my good doctor, but how many? If my calculations are correct with this amount, I can take your body back 10 to 15 years back. AFO leaned back into his chair with a satisfied smile on his face. That would be more than enough. Please doctor, make this your top priority. The doctor nodded and Kurogiri teleported him away. You're going back to your prime then, master. My prime is a lot more than 10 years, Kurogiri, AFO chuckled. I'll go back to check on Tamura, master, Kurogiri bowed. Make sure that Shigaraki doesn't screw up again. If Garaki succeeds, I may not need an heir so soon. Kurogiri nodded stiffly and left. Oh, All Might, what would you say the moment you see my face complete again? Izuku knew that going back to the monitoring room after his fight with All Might would mean a lot of fuss from his friends, and he appreciated that. As soon as he teleported in, he was surrounded by Ochako, Tenya, Tsuyu, and Kirishima congratulating him for his fight, and saying how strong he was becoming. What he didn't expect was that Kaminari would be lying on the floor unconscious with Mineta beside him praying, nor Mina pouncing on his back while chomping his head. He should have expected some retribution after his scare with the prosthetic. I guess you didn't appreciate my prank, huh? Mina's answer was trying to strangle him. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it again. Izuku wheezed. You better not. Mina finally released him and pouted. She then extended his robotic arm towards him and Izuku put it in its place. Have to admit, Midora bro, that wasn't manly, Kirishima said with crossed arms. You didn't look so angry about it when Mina jumped into your arms, Kiro, Tsuyu said bluntly. Now that I think about it, you looked really happy, Ochako added, smiling smugly. I don't know what you're talking about. Kirishima's red face betrayed that comment. Of course, you don't, said Izuku, who turned towards Mina, who was blushing too. He decided to spare his friends and change the topic. Why is Kaminari on the floor? Actually, we don't know. He just fainted when your match started, Momo said, joining the conversation. A pleasure to have you back, Midoriya. What an amazing entrance you had. Yeah, dude. We knew you were strong, but to give All Might a rough time. Juro whistled. You put the bar way too high, Green. All Might was restricted by the weights. I have a long way to go before even thinking of matching him, Izuku said while scratching his head, but please tell me how your exams went. His classmates started telling him about their test, and almost everyone joined the conversation. Kirishima and Mina both cried while retelling their fights. Even Todoroki in his stoic way joined and replayed his and Momo's exam. The poor heiress was distraught when Todoroki explained how she was doubting herself and almost made them fail. The only ones that didn't recount their exams were Bakugo, who disappeared almost as soon as Izuku entered the room. He just gave him a serious face, a small nod, and left. It was weird to Izuku not to see him with a scowl on his face. And Kaminari, who regained his consciousness a few minutes before they left the school. I just had the weirdest nightmare, he said to Mineta, who was seated beside him. Midoriya came back. His exam was to fight All Might. Kaminari snorted, and then he pulled an arm made of lightning out of nowhere. An arm made of lightning, could you believe that? I need to stop drinking so much sugar is messing with my brain. Kaminari, Mineta said while pointing to Izuku, who was beside them waving his hand shyly. That really happened and Midoriya did use that. Also, he just explained to us that lightning is the element his quirk works better with. And he also passed his exam. Kaminari looked at Izuku as if he was a monster. He quickly stood up and grabbed Izuku's shoulders. That means you can do more stuff with lighting. Izuku wanted to deny it after looking at the worried expression of his classmate, but Jiro decided to interfere with a sadistic smile. That's exactly what it means, lightning dolt. Wait, Green is better with lightning. That means that you're just a dolt, she said while smirking. Did I just become irrelevant? Kaminari whispered before fainting again. Zero sighed, put Kaminari over his shoulder, and left. Everyone laughed a little before leaving the school. The next day was a little gloomy for the ones who failed the exam. Kirishima and Mina were hanging from Izuku's arms. Midori bro, please, you have to do it. Midori, please, I don't want to lose the memories of a school trip with all of you. Mina's tears were flowing. Just teleport us to the camp at night to have some memories with you, and you teleport us back in the morning, the teachers won't know. Absolutely unacceptable. You have to follow the punishment for failing the exam. No matter how much we will miss you there, you can't break the rules. Iida scolded them. Iida, you know I love you, but you can't be talking about breaking rules, man. Kirishima deadpanned and Iida's head dropped to the floor. I don't think it's a bad idea, Izuku. They deserve some memories of our first school trip too, Ochako said, smiling and softly patting Iida on the back. It'll have to be after our daily activities, Kiro. Suyu put a finger on her chin. It can work, but I don't think we'll have enough energy to play with you guys, Kiro. No, you won't, Aizawa said from behind them. The group was startled at the sudden appearance. Aizawa sighed loudly. Why, it doesn't surprise me that it's your group, the one it's planning to smuggle someone to the camp. Izuku chuckled nervously. I mean, it couldn't hurt to just imagine the possibility, right? Izuku said with little strength in his words. Just imagine it, sure. Aizawa shook his head. Take a seat, I have an announcement. The group mood turned more cheerful after hearing how everyone was going to the camp, and it was just a logical ruse. Kirishima and Mina hugged each other tight, crying in happiness until Aizawa told them that they'll be having extra lessons, which soured their mood again a little. At the end of the day, everyone was talking about their incoming trip and how much they'll need to take there. Tomorrow is our free day, what if we go shopping together? Hagakure proposed. That seems like a good idea. We'll have quarters over there, but we still need to bring personal items, Iida said while reading the camp guide. Ah, of course we should go to the new mall. Mina said. New mall? Izuku asked. Yes. The mall with more stores in all of Mustafu. Kiyoshi Ward. Mina said excitedly while everyone cheered. 2 days after the exams. Shigaraki was staring at the newspaper with narrowed, hateful eyes. In its first page, was the story of Midoriya Izuku's fight with Stain. The name of the League of Villains was never mentioned in that article. It made his blood boil and his skin itch. Kurogiri meanwhile observed his guard with his stoic eyes, not betraying the worry he felt. He knew that Shigaraki was losing his mind more and more. He dusted more furniture and tableware in the last 2 days than when he was learning to use his quirk. The portal user also knew that his master was on his last straw of patience with Shigaraki. Now that there is a chance to return to a healthy state, the future of Shigaraki is on thin ice. He either stop failing or, Kurogiri didn't want to imagine what his master will do. A small ping on a tablet brought him out of his thoughts. Shigaraki Tamura, Jiren is here. The white-haired man entered the bar with a smug smile on his face. Shigaraki, how are you? When the hand villain didn't answer, Jiren continued, you're not making a lot of waves in the news, are you? Shigaraki dusted the newspaper he had in his hands and turned toward Jiren. What did you just say? He hissed and started scratching his neck. Jiren may not see it, but Kurogiri could easily see the madness in his red eyes. I mean that you need to go bigger if you want to make a splash in society, you know. Shigaraki growled, but let him continue, and I have the right people to help you do that splash. So, who are they? Jiren smirked and opened the door wide to let 2 people enter. One had his face joined by staples, black hair, and blue eyes. The other was a young blonde girl. Her hair was styled in 2 messy buns, and had amber cat-like eyes. Before they could say anything, Shigaraki talked. You don't seem useful to me. Shigaraki stood up and started walking towards the door. Kurogiri, toss them out of here. Shigaraki Tamura, we need more people in our group. Kurogiri extended his body in front of him. Sensei didn't need anyone, neither do I. Shigaraki hissed and walked through Kurogiri and walked out of the bar. Please forgive him, he is having difficult times, Kurogiri said to the newcomers. Don't worry, I'm just here because you guys were friends with Stain, right? I want to be with Stain's friends. The girl said cheerfully. I can see that your organization is in shambles. I came here to see if the group was worthy and followed Stain's path, but what do I find? The burned man pointed towards the door. A childish guy who seems really unstable, and then pointed at the girl, and a crazy student. Please forgive us, as I said, Shigaraki Tamura is having a bad day, that's all. Please take a seat. Do you want something to drink, Mr. and Ms. Dabi? Toga Himiko. Dabi, Toga, please take a seat while I go retrieve Shigaraki. A voice came out of nowhere. Let Tamura clear his mind, Kurogiri. Attend our guests as they deserve. Both Toga and Dabi froze and turned towards the computer from where the voice was coming from. Please think deeply about joining the League of Villains. I have a lot of plans for the future and having trustworthy people on our side could be useful. Toga and Dabi looked at each other before nodding towards the camera on the PC, wondering how a voice from a computer could sound so terrifying. Ah, thank you for considering us. Then AFO voice sounded in Kurogiri's mind. Kurogiri, the doctor gave me good news. The medicine is already in process and it'll be ready soon. We'll have a lot of work to do. Kurogiri shuddered at AFO's chuckle. I'll be in touch. Don't let Shigaraki do something idiotic. He is using his last opportunity. Kurogiri nodded mentally. The call ended with a worried Kurogiri and the new members of the League of Villains confused. The night of the exam day. Mirio was happy every time it was becoming easier to access OFA. He was proud of how far he was getting in that little time. He was coming out from the shower and was looking at himself in the mirror. His happy demeanor soured when he saw his reflection. He looked pale and exhausted. Even if the fight against the kid on 1A wasn't as easy as he thought it would be, it wasn't either a difficult fight. But for some reason, he felt exhausted, as if he fought Nijire and Tamaki at the same time. I guess my body is still getting accustomed to using AFO and consumes a lot of my energy, he muttered to himself. He took a deep breath and let AFO runs through his body. 40% was the max output he could use without any real damage to himself. White arcs of energy danced along his body and he smiled softly. He was happy from how far he was going. He felt like floating. His eyes widened when his feet left the floor and he started flailing his limbs wildly. Before he could make sense of what was happening, a sharp pain in his head made him gasp. Out of nowhere, from some place in his mind, he could hear voices. He hit singularity. A wispy voice said. He is in danger. He needs to stop right now. Another voice with a calming tone said, even if what he said sounded critical. Turn it off, turn it off. Another voice, a woman's voice, screamed at him. Mirio instinctually stopped using OFA and he dropped to the floor gasping for air. He could see blood covering the tiles of his bathroom, but he couldn't point from where it was coming from. Using all his strength, he used the sink to stand up and look at himself in the mirror, his eyes widening at the sight. The blood was coming from the 4 cracks that appeared on his face. It looked as if a wild animal just clawed his face open. He felt like fainting from shock and the blood loss wasn't helping. He dropped to the floor again and crawled toward his room. He wanted to scream for help, but his father wasn't home and he was sure his voice wasn't working. After some agonizing seconds, he managed to get to his room and grab his phone from his nightstand. Mirio could feel the darkness clouding his sight. Mirio. It's late. Do you need something? Sir Night-Eye said on the other side of the phone. Mirio. Are you there? Did you but dial me again? Help, was all Mirio could say before succumbing to the darkness. Mirio, are you alright? Night-Eye asked. Mirio, answer me please. His tone sounded more worried. Mirio, I'm tracking your phone right now. Don't worry, I'm coming, son. Sir Night-Eye felt like his heart was about to explode out of his chest while he drove like a madman toward Mirio, praying that he was quick enough. When he arrived at Mirio's home, he kicked the door open and ran towards the teen's room, only to find him lying on the ground in a pool of his own blood. He almost broke into tears after looking at the 4 cracks marring his face. He shook his face and kneeled quickly beside him, analyzing as much as he could. At least the bleeding seems to have stopped. He quickly called for an ambulance and put Mirio's head on a pillow before his detective instincts went into overdrive, analyzing everything around them. No trace of a fight, and Mirio's reflexes are honed to the extreme. The probability of a successful ambush is almost null. He turned to look at Mirio for a second before walking towards the door. The blood trail comes from the bathroom. He crawled from it. The sink is practically red. Was he looking into the mirror? He glanced around and after he was 100% sure that there were no enemies around, he got back to Mirio and kneeled beside him, taking his hand. What happened, Mirio? He whispered to the unconscious teen. After a few more minutes, the ambulance finally arrived. Once there were both in the ambulance, he started making calls. Toshinori, sorry to call you this late, but I need you in Mustafu's General Hospital as soon as possible. A beat, I'm okay, is about Mirio. The call ended after that. After the longest 10 minutes of his life, they finally arrived at the hospital. He was gladly surprised to see Toshinori already there. He must have come as All Might. Both men nodded at each other and followed Mirio's stretcher until the doctors stopped them. Please wait here until we run some tests. He seemed stable enough and the bleeding stopped a while ago, but he'll probably need a unit. The doctor turned quickly and entered a room. After a few moments of silence, All Might finally spoke. Was he attacked? The anxiety in his voice was palpable. Unlikely. There weren't signs of a fight, and Mirio is skilled enough to activate his permeation the second he experienced pain, Night Eye said, shaking his head. His face looked broken, Toshinori said through gritted teeth. I was watching his injuries in the ambulance. It looked as if his face just spontaneously was about to explode. Night Eye put his face on his hands. Do you think it was because of One for All? Toshinori asked in a whisper. I don't know, Yagi. I have not a single clue. Toshinori nodded and took his phone. Night Eye just observed him while he walked towards the exit. Where are you going? Recovery Girl is not only the best healer in Japan, but is also the one who knows everything about my quirk. Sir Night Eye nodded slowly and saw Toshinori run out of the building. After a few seconds, a boom in the distance signaled that All Might jumped away. Night Eye stood there waiting for any information on Mirio, praying that his stubbornness with AFO wasn't the cause his protege was in this delicate state. Because he wasn't sure he would be able to live with himself if that was the case. Izuku smiled softly while walking through Kiyoshi Ward with his friends. Everyone seemed to be goofing around more than looking to buy what they needed for their travel to the camp, and Iida was the most distraught by that. Friends, please, before we lose our composure, we need to buy the essentials for the camp. This Ki-chan is essential, Iida. Mina argued. No, is not. Izuku turned towards the stifled laugh beside him. Ochako was using all her willpower to not burst out laughing. We should probably go get what we need or Iida is going to get an aneurysm, Izuku said. Yeah, I just need some bug repellent. When I moved from Mie, I packed my camping gear with me in case I needed to sleep outside, Ochako said proudly. Why would you need to sleep outside? Ochako turned towards him with a raised eyebrow. In case my landlord decided to raise my rent. Ochako said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and Izuku nodded slowly. I need a few long-sleeved shirts in case the mosquitoes attack us. I can see the store from here. What do you say you go for the bug repellent, then I see you here in a few minutes to grab lunch? Izuku smiled at her soft blush. Can we grab some mochi? Izuku laughed. Only if you let me eat some. Last time we bought mochi you ate all of it. I did not. I swear it was Gamabu who ate it the last 3. Izuku knew she was telling the truth but shrugged. Ochako, Gamabu is the size of a mochi. What you're telling me doesn't make any sense. Ochako pouted at him and he couldn't stop his laughter. You're the worst. She turned around and walked away. I'm eating all your mochi, prepare yourself. Izuku watched Ochako leave with a fond expression. At least we're still getting lunch after. He turned to catch his friends when a raspy voice stopped him. That's so sweet that I almost vomit. Izuku felt his soul leave his body. He turned around quickly and pulled a kunai that he had hiding. Carrying weapons as a civilian must be a crime. Shigaraki was a few steps away from him with a baby carrier in his hand. Izuku's eyes widened, watching that a pinky finger was all that was stopping his quirk to harm the baby who was sleeping in it. It's blunt, he said automatically, his mind creating plans to save the baby. Ah, a cosplay prop, I see. Shigaraki scratched his neck. I want to talk to you, hero. The moment the word hero left Shigaraki's mouth, Izuku saw his body flinch. The look in his eyes seemed more manic. Put the baby on the floor then and we can talk. Liar, as all the heroes are. His pinky finger flinched. Okay, I'm sorry. What do you want to talk about? Izuku almost screamed. That's what I wanted to hear. Shigaraki smirked cruelly, then jerked his head to the side, signaling an aisle that didn't have any stores in it, so it was empty enough. Both walked slowly and in silence without losing sight of each other. When Shigaraki finally stopped, he started talking again. Tell me, hero, why does the League of Villains isn't getting the recognition it deserves? What? Izuku asked, bewildered. All that for that kind of question. Izuku quickly looked around looking for an ambush. You and Stain are all the people are talking about. I was there in Hosu too. My Namas were the ones creating havoc in the city. But no, all the people are talking about is your fight. Shigaraki screeched through gritted teeth. Tell me, hero, you've bested me once in UA, so you must know Why is the league not being called in all chat? Izuku was lost for words, not getting what Shigaraki was talking about. You want to be recognized? Izuku asked while slowly moving one of his seals toward Shigaraki. Yes, I'm supposed to be the next symbol of evil, and all that I am is a footnote in the papers, so tell me, hero, why I'm being ignored again. His pinky finger was almost on the baby carrier. Izuku blurted what it was in his mind. Purpose. The villain froze. Purpose? Shigaraki asked, confused. Nobody knows why the league is doing what is doing, without a purpose is just meaningless chaos. Izuku's seal was almost on his target. Stain's creed was all around the news and people could relate to him. He also stood by his beliefs until the very end. What you've shown to the world is that you just destroy for the sake of destruction and you don't have a purpose to die for. That's it then, I get it finally. All this is all my fault. Izuku raised an eyebrow. I don't understand how you got to that conclusion, but I'll be taking the baby. Half a second was all Izuku needed. He teleported beside Shigaraki and ripped the baby carrier from his hand. Before Shigaraki could comprehend what happened, Izuku kicked him away, sending him flying deeper into the empty aisle. He then threw his kunai into the villain's arm. You said that it was blunt. Shigaraki hissed and was about to pull the kunai out of his arm when Izuku teleported beside him and punched him with his robotic arm. I lied. Izuku smirked and summoned 5 shadow clones, 4 to stop the people from entering the aisle after the commotion, and the last one took the baby and teleported away. It's over, Shigaraki, you can't take hostages and I'm faster than you. There is nowhere to go. I really hate you, hero. Shigaraki spat in anger. Kurogiri, get me out of here. Prepared himself to stop Shigaraki from leaving, but no purple mist appeared. Kurogiri, I said get me out of here. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Nothing was happening. The manic look in Shigaraki turned to one of fear. Kurogiri. That sounded like a whisper. It seems that your drive forgot about you, Shigaraki. As over, Shigaraki's eyes screamed hate. He quickly stood up and dashed towards Izuku in an attempt to use his quirk on him. Izuku dodged all the swipes Shigaraki threw with ease. His anger made his attacks easier to read. Izuku crouched and swept the legs from the villain, who fell roughly to the floor. Shigaraki rolled away and put a hand on the wall. It started to decay, but before his quirk could do significant damage to the structure, Izuku teleported to the kunai that still was on the villain's arm and punched him away from the wall. I told you, Shigaraki, is over. Surrender, there is nothing you can do. Izuku saw the meaning of his words enter Shigaraki's mind. The hate in his eyes turned into fear, and the fear turned into something animalistic, as if his reasoning just stopped working and the primal part of it took control. When the villain put his hands on the floor, Izuku's eyes widened, seeing the ground beneath. Shigaraki quickly started disappearing. It's decaying faster. He teleported behind Shigaraki and grabbed both his wrists and pulled them behind his back. I'm sorry, Shigaraki, but I need you to sleep. Lightning style. Earth flash. Izuku's hands released an enormous amount of lightning directly into Shigaraki's body. Izuku was surprised at Shigaraki's endurance. The amount of lightning he was using should have knocked out someone after a couple of seconds. Shigaraki fought for almost 20 seconds before his body felt limp. Izuku sighed and wrapped the villain's hands behind back him with his belt. After that, Izuku pulled out his phone. Ochako, hey, there was a situation. Izuku, I heard the ruckus and towards your location, are you okay? Shigaraki was here in the mall. Izuku heard a gasp on the other side of the line. Don't worry, I took care of it, but I don't feel comfortable waiting for the heroes here. I'm going to take him to the police station and bring Nezu and Aizawa. Understood, please be careful. After a quick reassurance, Izuku ended the call and mentally searched the tag he had on the police station. When he felt it, both the villain and the green hero disappeared from the mall. I swear to God, Midoriya, I'm this close to expelling you, Aizawa said, exasperated. Don't be so hard on him, Eraser. Izuku did well. He captured the villain with minimum collateral damage and no civilians were hurt. Nezu chirped happily. By the way, where is the baby he had hostage? Ah, he is here in the station. My clone teleported towards Recovery Girl, but she wasn't in her office, so he brought him here. I hope they can find the parents, Izuku said while Nezu nodded satisfied. Good job, Izuku. I'm proud of you, Nezu said smiling. Don't misunderstand, I'm proud too, but you're making me want to retire soon, Aizawa said tiredly. Izuku chuckled and then turned serious. What's going to happen to Shigaraki? He'll be sent to Tartarus and then we'll try to dig out everything he knows about this League of Villains. Izuku furrowed his eyebrows. Do you really think we can get anything from him? At the end of our talk he looked like a rabid animal more than a person, Izuku sighed. He probably entered into a fight or flight state, Aizawa explained. Exactly, and that state could have prompted the change in his quirk. Izuku knew that stress, fear, anger, hate, or any strong emotion could prompt a new development in a quirk. Go to sleep Izuku, you'll be traveling in 2 days, you need to rest after all. Eraser is going to put you through the ringer. Izuku saw the smirk Aizawa had on his face and sighed. He said his goodbyes and teleported towards his home. When he arrived, he heard the laughter inside, which wasn't strange, but there was another laugh in there that he knew wasn't supposed to be there. When he opened the door, he was received by a peculiar sight. Eri was in her All Might's pajamas with her foot on Akiko's back in a triumphant pose, while Ochako lay on the floor with an exaggerated pose of defeat. She had her tongue out and everything. And All Might save the day again. Eri said happily, no evil villain will ever defeat the symbol of peace. Izuku smirked and teleported behind Eri using the kunai that was always on her belt and lifted her in the air. Eri squeaked and flailed to no avail. Ah, the symbol of peace must have been losing his touch if he fell for an ambush like this. Izuku said in a grave tone, you're in my hands now, All Might. Izuku then started to tickle Eri, who couldn't stop the pearls of laughter escaping her. Izuku would always cherish that sound. Izuku, stop. Eri said between laughs. Ochako, help. Suddenly Izuku felt his weight disappear and now he was being held high by Ochako. Ah, my partner in crime is betraying me. Izuku said dramatically. There is no honor between villains, Ochako said with mirth. The three laughed heartily for a while before Ochako finally put Izuku on the floor again. Izuku kept Eri in his arms while the little girl was hugging him tightly. Ochako came with a box of mochi. Eri said happily. Izuku turned to the brunette with a raised eyebrow. Well, I didn't want the day to end with us not having any mochi. We wanted some for lunch after all. Izuku smiled at her and nodded. That's very sweet of you, Ochako, Izuku said while taking her hand with his robotic one. His heart beat faster when she didn't recoil from the cold feeling of the metal. Before he could say anything else, Eri put her hands over his ear and whispered. You should take one quickly. She almost ate all of it. Ochako turned as red as a tomato and started stuttering denials while Izuku and Eri laughed. On the couch Inko smiled softly at the scene. She took a lot of pictures and sent them in their own little world to Mina, who replied in a vast combination of emojis. Before she made herself present, she sent a picture to Ochako, the picture of Izuku carrying a laughing Eri and Ochako carrying a laughing Izuku. Sir Night-Eye and All Might in his deflated form were waiting for Recovery Girl. Assessment. Both men silent, hoping for the best. After a couple of hours, Night-Eye decided to break the silence. Have you heard anything from Torino? All Might shook his head. I only told him to investigate the other users of One for All a couple hours ago. Mirai. He'll tell us whatever information he gets as soon as he can. I know. I'm sorry. I can't stop thinking about every possible variable. Toshinori put a hand on Night-Eye's shoulder. I get it, Mirai. I'm worried too. But right now, all we can do is wait. Both men fell silent again for what seemed hours until finally, the heroine walked slowly towards them. Shuzenji, please tell us some good news. The somber sight of Recovery Girl told them everything. First of all, Togeda's father is here now, so act with caution. Right now, he is stable, but we need to keep him unconscious. Both heroes' eyes widened. He woke up while we were running some tests and he started crying in pain. We had to sedate him. She saw how Night-Eye's knuckles turned white. The majority of tests results are normal. At the moment the only one that it's different from the ones he had before is the quirk factor test, which is normal I suppose, after all he now have OFA in his system. Do you think that's the reason for his state? Night-Eye asked nervously. Is a possibility but is still too soon to tell. We have more tests to run but I fear we will not have an accurate answer even after those. After all his case is unique, Recovery Girl concluded. So, we will never know for sure if OFA is hurting him, All Might said before sighing loudly. We need more information on the predecessors, Night-Eye said and All Might nodded. Shuzenji, could you please take care of him, while we investigate? Whatever you plan to do it quickly. I'll do my best to keep him stable. Recovery Girl nodded and walked away to the ICU. Both heroes walked faster toward the exit. Does Shimura ever tell you anything about a one-for-all user whose body rejected the quirk? Night Eye asked. She didn't. All I know is that her predecessor gave it to her minutes before dying to his wounds. Night Eye nodded. And, Nana never said anything about one-for-all hurting her, All Might said sadly. Sorry for asking this, but I need to start gathering information. All Might nodded in understanding. We need to join Torino. What would we do if one-for-all is hurting him? Night Eye stopped in his tracks. You should get it back. All Might nodded. If that's possible, I will. Night Eye's head turned towards All Might quickly, who understood the questioning gaze. There is a lot that we don't know about the quirk Mirai. What if I can't get it back after passing it? What if my body rejected the transfer? After all, one-for-all was already failing me when I had it. There is also the part where the user has to choose to transfer it, and we'll have to explain that to young Tagata while he's suffering by being awake. Is not that I don't want to accept it back, Mirai. I would gladly do it even if it kills me as soon as it enters my body. But we're navigating in shadows. All Might saw the eyes of his old friend fill up with tears and put a hand on his shoulder. We'll save him, Mirai. Whatever it takes, we'll save young Tagata. Night Eye took a deep breath and nodded. Both heroes walked towards Night Eye's agency with a little shimmer of hope in their hearts. Shigaraki's mind was a mess. Part of him wanted to scream in rage, hate, and despair, and the most humane part of his mind wanted answers. Why does Kurogiri didn't attend his calling? Does Sensei forget about him? Of course, he wouldn't forget him. He is his heir. The questions revolved in his mind while he was being transported to Tartarus, clasped from head to toe in quirk-suppressing technology. Even his mouth was covered. Suddenly the vehicle he was being transported stopped moving and his ears perked up at all the sounds that the explosions outside made. He heard something heavy drop over the vehicle he was in, and the officers driving it started screaming but were promptly silenced by a nasty crunch. The door of the vehicle exploded, and after a few seconds of his sight accommodating to the light, he saw a couple of Namas looking at him. One had a smaller Nomu in its shoulder. Shigaraki smiled. Of course Sensei wouldn't forget about his heir. He saw the small Nomu open its mouth and vomit a black ooze that enveloped him and the Namas. When the light returned to his eyes, he was in the doctor's lab, still wrapped in quirk-suppressing tech, but he could wait until the Namas freed him. At least that was his thought until he saw the Namas walk away, leaving him trapped. His anger started raising when a voice called for him. Shigaraki Tamura. All for One was seated in front of him, covered by shadows. It seems that you failed me again. Shigaraki wanted to scream and explain to him, but the metal piece in his mouth stopped him. Of course you can't talk. Shigaraki saw a minuscule movement from his sensei's hand and the metal over his mouth was ripped away. Sensei, is not my fault. Is All Might and that Hokage's fault? Shigaraki waited for an answer, but All for One stood silent in the shadows. Please release me and let me go and kill them, Sensei. I hate them. A grave sigh was his only answer. You know, Shigaraki Tamura, when I decided to make you my heir, was mostly because you're related to someone that my nemesis loved. Shigaraki froze. He didn't know that. Imagining his broken spirit when I revealed that my heir is the grandson of his master made me put up with you most of the time. Sen, Shigaraki started, but another movement of a hand put the metal over his mouth again. Then 6 years ago he almost killed me, so I had no other choice but to keep cultivating you, turning you into the perfect heir for my reign. All for One then sighed exasperated, but you can't turn a koi fish into a dragon when the koi fish is nothing but useless. I had plans for you, Shigaraki, but you kept failing over and over again. Kurogiri told me you needed more real experience, and to be honest I planned to give you more opportunities, until a few days ago I was rewarded by another chance. All for One stood up slowly and Shigaraki's eyes widened when the Lord of the Underworld walked towards him. All for One was in front of him, revealing his white hair, red eyes, and the most malicious smile Shigaraki have ever seen. The universe decided to give me another chance to fix this broken world. All for One put a hand on Shigaraki's head. Don't worry, you may not be my heir anymore, but I do have plans for you. Shigaraki's eyes widened. What do you say, my good doctor? Is he ready? The drugs I put in him after he lost his arm must have already taken effect. Shigaraki saw the doctor walk from behind him. From the notes on the police files, he already evolved his quirk, which means he is ready. Perfect. After all, I need a distraction, and if we're lucky he'll finally achieve his goal of killing All Might. All for One smiled darkly. Even if he failed you so much, you're giving him one final chance to achieve his dreams. You sure are benevolent, Master. Of course, I am, dear doctor. Prepare everything, don't skimp on anything you need, and boost him as much as that body of his can handle. The doctor nodded and put a syringe on Shigaraki's neck, who screamed internally. His senses started to darken slowly. The last thing he heard before the darkness engulfed him was All for One and the doctor talking as if he weren't there. He'll be a good distraction. Master. He will, and I think it's time to take this fight between my brother and me out of the shadows. To finally take my deserved place as the lord of this world. But to do that I need an army. You are an army by yourself, Master, Garaki said. I may be one, but what is a lord without an army? No, I need one, but building one from zero would take years, and I'm done waiting. Fortunately for us, there is a pretty good army waiting for me in Deku City. Shigaraki barely saw both villains walking away, leaving him trapped and alone. Finally, a few moments later, Shigaraki Tamura was no more. Hope you enjoy the story. See you in the next video.